The transport pod hissed as it engaged the magnetic docking clamps, a sound like a dying serpent that made Kalen Vance flinch. His hand twitched toward his hip, seeking the reassuring weight of a pulse pistol that was no longer there. The Orithian guards flanking him did not react. They were tall, elegant creatures, their skin the color of polished obsidian dust, wearing helmets that obscured their faces in seamless golden curves. To them, the docking sequence was mundane. To Kalen, every sudden noise was a trigger, a ghost from a war that had officially ended 3 years ago but still raged inside his skull. The airlock cycled open, revealing the grand atrium of the Orithian capital station. Even Kalen, with 10 years of combat drops and planetary sieges etched into his retinas, had to pause. The station was a ring world, a halo of spun glass and kinetic fields hovering above the crushing gravity of a luminous violet gas giant. The floor beneath his boots was transparent, offering a terrifying, vertiginous view of the swirling storms thousands of miles below. It felt like walking on nothing, a deliberate architectural choice to remind visitors of their insignificance. He stepped forward, his heavy combat boots clanking rhythmically against the pristine surface, a discordant industrial noise in a symphony of silence. They called him a security consultant. It was a polite fiction, a diplomatic euphemism invented by the Treaty of Orav that allowed a human veteran to walk the halls of the former enemy without sparking a diplomatic incident. Kalen knew what he really was. He was a trophy. He was a curiosity. He was a reminder that humanity, though bloodied and battered, had teeth sharp enough to tear out the throat of an empire. One of the guards gestured with a slender, 6-fingered hand. Move. Kalen adjusted the collar of his dress uniform. It was stiff, uncomfortable, and lacked the ballistic weave he preferred. He felt naked, his face, reflected in a passing pane of holographic glass, looked older than his 35 years. A jagged line of pale scar tissue ran from his left temple down to his jaw, disappearing into his collar, a souvenir from a plasma grenade on the moon of Xylos. His eyes were gray and dead, scanning every alcove, every ventilation grate, every passing noble for potential firing lines. The corridors were filled with the elite of the Orithian Empire. They drifted rather than walked, their robes shifting colors like oil on water. They spoke in melodic, humming tones that vibrated in Kalen's chest. As he passed, conversation died. Large, luminescent eyes turned to watch the human predator in their midst. He could smell their fear, masked by the scent of ozone and spiced incense. It smelled like victory, though it smelled like ash. They reached a massive set of double doors made of iridescent pearl. The guards stopped and crossed their energy pikes, barring the way for a moment before the doors dissolved into mist. This was the private audience chamber of the Third Scion. Kalen stepped through the mist. The room was vast, dominated by a panoramic view of the gas giant's storm eye. In the center, lounging on a divan that defied gravity, floating a few feet off the floor, was Princess Ilara. She was blinding. That was the only word for it. Her skin was a pale, translucent violet, and bioluminescent markings traced intricate, glowing geometric patterns along her high cheekbones and down her neck. Her hair was a waterfall of living silver strands that moved of their own accord, reacting to the air currents. She wore a gown of shifting light fabric that seemed to be made of the aurora borealis itself, wrapping around her slender form in ways that suggested nudity without revealing it. She looked up as he entered, her eyes solid orbs of electric blue flaring brighter. "Consultant Vance," she said. Her voice was like a plucked harp string, resonating in the quiet room. "You walk loudly." Kalen stopped 10 paces away and offered a stiff, human military bow. He refused to kneel. That was in his contract. Your Highness, Kalen rumbled. His voice was gravel compared to her melody. Gravity plating is calibrated for your mass, not mine. I am dense, Ilara smiled, exposing teeth that were slightly too sharp to be comforting. She floated off the divan, her bare feet touching the floor with zero sound. She circled him, moving with the fluid grace of an aquatic predator. She was studying him, her glowing eyes tracing the line of his scar, the width of his shoulders, the scarred knuckles of his hands. They told me you killed 50 of my father's Praetorians on the Ridge of Silence, she said, her tone light, as if discussing the weather. They say you are a monster wrapped in human skin. Exaggeration, Kalen said flatly, keeping his eyes forward. It was 32. And I had air support. She laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Modesty. How quaint. I have read your file. Human. You are not modest. You are efficient. You survive where things die. That is why I asked for you. Kalen turned his head slightly to track her. She was standing behind him now, close enough that he could feel the static charge coming off her skin. I am here to advise on palace security protocols. Highness, Kalen said. If you have a specific concern regarding perimeter breaches or surveillance gaps, I am at your disposal. Ilara drifted back into his field of view, leaning against a pedestal topped with a floating crystal. She looked bored, the bioluminescence on her cheeks dimmed to a sullen indigo. Security protocols are dull. Vance, the war is over. The peace is boring. I did not summon you to look at schematics. I summoned you because I require an escort. An escort, Kalen repeated. Yes, I intend to leave the station. Tonight. Kalen frowned. His internal threat assessment spiked. Leaving the station required a massive security detail. Armored transports, flight paths cleared hours in advance. I will notify the captain of the guard, Kalen said, reaching for his comms link. We can have a convoy ready in 2 hours. No, Ilara said sharply. Her hand shot out, her long, cool fingers wrapping around his wrist. Her strength was surprising. Orithians looked fragile, but their muscle density was deceiving. No guards, no convoys, no buzzing swarm of sycophants. Just you and me. Kalen looked at her hand on his wrist, then up to her glowing eyes. This is a violation of protocol. Highness, it is unsafe. You are the heir to the third sector. There are factions that would pay a fleet's ransom for your head. And you are the man who killed 32 Praetorians, Ilara countered, her eyes dancing with mischief. If I am with you, I am safe. Unless you plan to kill me? The thought had crossed his mind during the war, purely as a tactical necessity. But he pushed it away. Where do you want to go? Kalen asked, his voice wary. She leaned in closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Her scent hit him, something like cinnamon and ozone. The Undercity, she said, the Bazaar of Echoes. Kalen stiffened. The bazaar was an open secret, a tangled labyrinth of docking structures bolted to the underside of the main ring. It was a hive of smugglers, black market tech dealers, and flesh peddlers. It was the one place on the station where imperial law was a suggestion rather than a mandate. Absolutely not, Kalen stated. That sector is uncontrolled space. I have an appointment, she insisted, tugging on his arm like a petulant child. There is a merchant there. He claims to have something unique, a rarity. I want to see it. What could you possibly need from a smuggler's den that you cannot command from the treasury? She let go of his wrist and spun away, her robes flaring. I want a pet, she declared. Kalen blinked. A pet, yes. Something exotic. something living. Lady Vess has a telepathic feline from the nebulae, and Lord Kalen, Lord Kairos, has a songbird that eats kinetic energy. I want something better, something dangerous. Kalen felt a cold knot form in his stomach. During the war, he had liberated prison camps where humans were kept in cages, stripped of dignity, treated as livestock by Orithian commanders who viewed them as lesser beings. The word pet tasted like bile in his throat. Get a dog, Kalen said, his tone dropping to a dangerous low. Boring, Ilara dismissed. I want something that screams status, and you are going to help me find it. You promised. I did no such thing. You signed the contract, she said, tapping a holographic interface in the air. Paragraph 4, Section 2. The consultant agrees to facilitate the personal security and logistical requirements of the royal household upon request. This is a logistical requirement. That is a twisted interpretation of the text, Kalen said, his jaw tightening. She stepped close again, looking up at him through her lashes. Her bioluminescence shifted to a soft, inviting pink. Are you afraid, consultant? The big, scary human soldier is afraid of a little shopping trip. Or perhaps you think I cannot handle myself. I think you treat the universe like a toy box, Kalen said bluntly. And you do not understand that some toys bite back. I have you to bite them for me, she said, smiling. Unless you prefer a leash. I heard humans enjoy that sort of thing. Subjugation. Kalen's eyes narrowed. I do not fetch sticks, Highness. And I do not wear leashes. Then prove it, she challenged. Come with me. Keep me safe. Or I will tell my father you refused a direct command from the throne, and your precious consultancy contract, and the reparations money it sends to your ruined homeworld, will be voided. It was blackmail, playful, perhaps, in her mind, but financial ruin for his people in reality. He looked at her, seeing the spoilt arrogance of royalty, but also a strange, frantic boredom. She was a bird in a gilded cage desperate to see the sky, even if the sky was full of hawks. 1 hour, Kalen said, his voice like grinding stone. We take a stealth shuttle. I drive. If I sense a threat, we extract immediately. No arguments. Ilara clapped her hands, the sound sharp and joyous. Deal. The shuttle was a sleek, needle-nosed craft, painted matte black to absorb sensor pings. Kalen piloted it manually, his hands dancing over the haptic controls with practiced ease. He kept them in the shadow of the station's massive radiator fins, slipping through the sensor blind spots he had identified weeks ago. The cabin was small, intimate. Ilara sat in the co-pilot seat, her legs crossed, watching him work. She had donned a hooded cloak of heavy gray fabric to obscure her glowing markings, but the light still pulsed faintly beneath the weave. You are very tense, she observed. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of the engines. I am working, Kalen replied, not looking at her. You have beautiful hands, she said suddenly. For a killer. Kalen's hands froze for a microsecond before resuming the course correction. They were scarred, square, and calloused. They are tools, nothing more. Do you have a mate? Ilara asked. Humans pair bond, do they not? Or do you simply collide and separate like asteroids? We pair bond, Kalen said, his patience fraying. I do not have one. Why? Because I spent 10 years watching my friends vaporize in front of me. Highness. It tends to dampen the romantic impulse. Ilara went quiet for a moment. I lost a brother in the war. On Xylos. Kalen stared at the navigation display. The red targeting reticle pulsed. He had been on Xylos. The fighting there had been hand-to-hand, brutal and intimate. I am sorry, Kalen said. Are you? She asked, her tone genuinely curious. Or are you just saying that because protocol demands it? I am sorry that young men die for old men's arguments, Kaylin said. On both sides. The shuttle banked sharply, descending into the smog and chaotic traffic of the undercity. The gleaming spires of the capital vanished, replaced by rusted gantries, flickering neon signs in a dozen languages, and the grime of unregulated industry. We are here, Kaylin announced. Hood up. Stay behind me. Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch anything. You are very bossy for a servant, Ilara teased, pulling her hood low. I am not a servant, Kaylin said as he engaged the landing gear. I am the only thing standing between you and a ransom video. They disembarked into a wall of noise. The bazaar of echoes was an assault on the senses. The air smelled of burnt grease, ozone, unwashed bodies, and exotic spices. The corridors were narrow, crowded with species from across the sector, bulky crustacean traders, spindly cybernetic drifters, and hooded figures exchanging credit chips for sealed canisters. Music throbbed from the walls, a discordant bass rhythm that rattled Kaylin's teeth. He moved with a predator's grace, clearing a path for Ilara. He kept his body angled to shield her, his eyes constantly moving. Threat assessment. High. Weapons detected everywhere. Ilara, however, was enchanted. She peered out from her hood, her glowing eyes wide. She pointed at a stall selling unauthorized cybernetic limbs. She gasped at a tank containing a swirling vortex of sentient gas. Look, she whispered, grabbing Kaylin's jacket. That trader has a pre-collapse memory core. Those are illegal. Keep moving, Kaylin growled, steering her away from a group of mercenaries who were eyeing her expensive cloak. They pushed deeper into the market, moving toward the biological sector. Here, the smell changed. It became muskier, organic, laced with antiseptics and fear. The stalls were replaced by cages. Some held beasts that were clearly animals, six-legged wolves from the ice moons, chirping colorful lizards, massive serpentine constrictors, but others were disturbing. Kaylin saw a cage containing a creature that looked like a cephalopod with a human-like face. It pressed its tentacles against the glass and whispered in a dialect that sounded painfully familiar to a trade tongue Kaylin knew. Help me. It seemed to hiss. Or perhaps it was just gas escaping a valve. Kaylin felt a spike of nausea. He remembered the labs he had raided near the end of the war. The things the Orithian scientists had done to try and create the perfect soldier. We should go, Kaylin said, stopping. This is not a place for you. We are close, Ilara insisted, checking a coordinate on her wrist comp. The broker said he is in the deep sector, level 4. Kaylin checked his perimeter. 2 reptilian guards with stun batons were watching them. He glared at them until they looked away. 5 minutes, Kaylin said. Then we leave, with or without your pet. They reached the end of the corridor, where a heavy blast door stood guarded by 2 automated turret drones. A hologram flickered to life, a sleek, well-dressed Orithian male with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Ah, the mysterious buyer, the hologram crooned, and a very heavily armed chaperone. Please, enter. The doors hissed open. The room beyond was surprisingly sterile, a stark contrast to the filth outside. It was a showroom. The lighting was low and dramatic, focusing on several large containment units. The proprietor stepped out from the shadows. He was short for an Orithian, wearing robes of expensive crimson silk. He smelled of heavy perfume, likely to mask the chemical tang of the preservation fluids. Welcome, welcome, the vendor said, bowing low. I am Vex. You are the one seeking distinction? "Show me," Ilara said, her voice commanding despite her disguise. Vex clapped his hands. The lights shifted, illuminating a massive transparent cell in the center of the room. Kaelin felt the air leave his lungs. She was standing in the center of the cell, head bowed. She was tall, perhaps 7 feet, dwarfing Kaelin. Her skin was covered in fine, iridescent scales that shifted from emerald to gold, though they looked dull now, dusty and grayed by malnutrition or drugs. She was humanoid, undeniably so. 2 arms, 2 legs, the curves of a female form. But emerging from her back were 2 massive, leathery wings, folded tight against her body like a cape. Her hands ended in black talons. Her feet were clawed, gripping the metal grate of the floor. She wore nothing but ragged scraps of gray fabric around her waist and chest. Around her neck was a thick, heavy collar of black metal, pulsing with a faint red light. A shock collar. Military grade. Magnificent, isn't she? Vex purred, walking toward the glass. A draconian hybrid, genetically woven from human stock and the apex predators of the worm systems. Kaelin stepped closer, drawn in by a horror he couldn't name. The creature, the woman, lifted her head. Her face was angular, noble and terrifying. Her nose was flat, reptilian, and 2 small horns curled back from her forehead. But her eyes were golden, with vertical slit pupils. They were not the eyes of an animal. They were the eyes of a person. She looked at Kaelin. The contact was physical, like a static shock. He saw fear. He saw exhaustion. And beneath it all, a deep, burning intelligence. "She can breathe fire?" Ilara asked, stepping up beside Kaelin, her voice hushed with awe. "Plasma, actually," Vex corrected. "Ionized gas generated in a secondary organ near the lungs. Range of 20 meters. Melts durasteel. She can fly for short durations. She is strong enough to rip a blast door off its hinges." "Is she safe?" Ilara asked, reaching out to touch the glass. "Perfectly," Vex assured her. "The collar is linked to a neural inhibitor. If she shows aggression, she is incapacitated instantly. If she disobeys, a mild correction is applied. She is fully broken, a perfect bodyguard, a perfect status symbol. Imagine her at the Imperial Ball, walking behind you on a chain of gold. No one would dare meet your gaze." Kaelin stared at the collar. He zoomed in with his ocular implant. There were markings etched into the black metal, serial numbers, and a symbol he recognized, a jagged triangle inside a circle. Project Chimera. Kaelin's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a biomod. This was a soldier. During the war, rumors had circulated of Orithian Black Ops labs creating hybrids to fight in environments where regular troops died. Living weapons, sapient, thinking, feeling weapons. "She is not a pet," Kaelin said, his voice quiet but shaking with suppressed rage. Vex looked at him, annoyed. "She is whatever the buyer says she is." "She is merchandise. How smart is she?" Kaelin demanded, turning to the vendor. "Smart enough to take orders? Smart enough to know who holds the remote?" Vex sneered. "She has partial sapience, mimicry, mostly, like a parrot." "Liar," Kaelin thought. He looked back at the dragon woman. She was trembling, a fine, continuous tremor that rattled her wings. She wasn't an animal reacting to a predator. She was a prisoner reacting to her jailer. Ilara was mesmerized. She pressed her hand against the glass. The dragon woman flinched, pulling back, a low growl rumbling in her throat, a sound like tectonic plates shifting. Vex raised a small remote device. "Sit," he commanded. He pressed a button. The dragon woman convulsed. She didn't scream, but her mouth opened in a silent gasp of agony. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor, panting, smoke curling from her nostrils. "Stop it," Kalen barked, stepping forward. Vex released the button. "See?" Obedient. Ilara stared at the creature on the floor. The awe in her face was warring with something else. Discomfort? Pity. She looked at the raw burns around the woman's neck. "She is intense," Ilara murmured. "The price is high," Vex said, rubbing his hands. 300,000 credits, a bargain for a unique biological masterpiece. Kalen grabbed Ilara's arm. "We are leaving." "What?" Ilara blinked, breaking her trance. "We are leaving. Now." "This is illegal. This is a war crime," Kalen hissed in her ear. "That is a sentient being. That is a prisoner of war. It is a hybrid," Vex corrected smoothly. "Property." Ilara looked at Kalen. She saw the genuine distress in his face, the way his hand hovered near his phantom pistol. Then she looked back at the dragon woman. The creature had lifted her head again. She was looking directly at Ilara now. There was no begging in those golden eyes, only a profound, crushing sorrow. "I want her," Ilara whispered. "No," Kalen said firmly. "You do not want this." Ilara turned to him. Her bioluminescence flared bright, erratic. She was terrified, Kalen realized. Terrified of the creature, but also fascinated by the raw power, the broken beauty of it. She saw something in that cage that mirrored her own gilded existence. She turned her back on Kalen and looked at the dragon woman. The creature was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Ilara leaned closer to Kalen, rising on her tiptoes so her mouth was inches from his ear. Her voice dropped to a breath, soft, intimate, and devastatingly naive. "You promised me a pet," she whispered. The words hit Kalen like a physical blow. "You promised me a pet." He looked at the princess. She didn't understand. She saw a toy. She saw a cool accessory to parade in front of her rivals. She didn't see the torture. She didn't see the soul behind the scales. But then he looked at Vex. The vendor was watching Kalen with suspicion now. His hand was drifting toward an alarm panel under the desk. The guards by the door shifted their grip on their stun batons. If they walked away now, Vex would sell her to someone else. Someone who would use her for pit fighting. Or worse, she would die in chains. She would die alone. Thousands of light years from whatever test tube she was born in. Kalen looked at the dragon woman. She held his gaze. "Please." Her eyes seemed to say, guilt, heavy and suffocating, crashed down on him. He had spent 10 years killing. He had walked away from the labs because it was above his pay grade. He had followed orders. He looked at Ilara's expectant, spoiled face. She was forcing him to choose. Be the consultant, the tool, the good soldier who follows the contract. Or be the human being he thought he had lost in the mud of Xylos. "Walk away," his training screamed. "This is a trap. This is a political nightmare. Save her," his conscience whispered. Kalen took a slow breath. He let his posture relax, the false calm of a soldier about to breach a door. He looked at Vex. "Fine," Kalen said, his voice flat, "but for that price. I want to inspect the merchandise, up close. Open the cage." Vex hesitated, then smiled greedily. "Of course. But mind the fire." As the containment field hummed down, Kalen stepped toward the cage, his mind racing through tactical scenarios. He wasn't buying a pet. He was starting a war. And God help him. He was doing it for a princess who just wanted something pretty to hold. The containment field hummed with a low, thrumming vibration that rattled Kalen's molars. He stood less than 2 feet from the glass, his reflection superimposed over the terrified, golden eyes of the creature within. Up close, The horror was specific and granular. He could see the jagged scar tissue around the neural ports implanted at the base of her skull. He could see the way her scales, which should have been lustrous armor, were flaking and gray from vitamin deficiency and the stress of constant sedation. Ilara stepped up beside him, her breath fogging the glass. She was still smiling, caught in the fantasy of the acquisition. "Look at her," Ilara whispered, her voice thick with wonder. "She is perfect. Vex says she can crush a combat droid with one hand. Imagine her in the garden. Vance, imagine the look on Lady Vess's face." Kalen turned on his heel, grabbing the princess by the upper arm. He did not possess the gentle touch of a courtier. He gripped her with the force of a man used to hauling wounded comrades out of firing lines. He dragged her 3 steps back, away from the vendor's earshot, and pinned her with a glare that was colder than the void outside the station. "Stop," Kalen hissed. Ilara blinked, the bioluminescence on her cheekbones flaring a startled violet. She tried to yank her arm away, but his grip was iron. "Release me." "Consultant," she snapped, her voice rising. "You forget your place. My place is to keep you from committing an atrocity," Kalen growled, his voice a low rumble in his chest. "Look at her, Ilara. Really look at her. That is not an animal. That is not a pet." Ilara frowned, glancing back at the cage. "It is a hybrid," Vex said. "Vex is a flesh peddler," Kalen cut in, his voice sharp. "He is lying to you. Look at the collar. Look at the injection ports. I saw those in the Valerian campaign. They do not put neural inhibitors on animals. Highness, they put them on soldiers. They put them on prisoners who refuse to break." Ilara's face hardened, her royal pride bristling against his tone. "You are being dramatic. It is a bioform, a construct. It mimics emotion because it was designed to be expressive." "Mimics?" Kalen let out a harsh, barking laugh. "You think that fear is a mimicry? You think the way she is tracking the guard's stun baton is a programmed response? That is trauma." "I did not know," Ilara said, her voice wavering slightly, though she kept her chin high. "How could I know? They are illegal. They are not supposed to exist. Ignorance is a luxury you can no longer afford," Kalen said. He released her arm and stepped back to the glass. He needed to prove it. He needed to shatter the glass house the princess lived in before they both got killed. He looked directly into the dragon woman's slit pupils. She was watching him, her body tensed, waiting for the shock. Kalen took a breath and switched languages. He did not speak in the melodious trade tongue of the Empire, nor the harsh consonants of Earth Standard. He spoke in Kavos, a gutter dialect used by the darker factions of the war, the language of the labs and the black sites. "Unit D7, Kalen grated out, the sounds harsh and clicking. "Report status. Designate allegiance." Beside him, Ilara gasped. The sound was ugly, guttural, completely at odds with Kalen's usual stoic silence. Inside the cage, the dragon woman froze. Her wings flared slightly, instinctively trying to shield her body. Her pupils dilated, blowing wide until her eyes were almost entirely black. She pressed a clawed hand against the glass, her breath hitching. She opened her mouth. Her voice was a wreck, a sound like grinding gravel and broken glass, unused for months, perhaps years. Status. Compromised, she rasped back in the same dialect. The words slow, heavy with the weight of sedation, pain, constant allegiance. She paused, her eyes squeezing shut as if fighting a headache induced by the collar. Allegiance. None. Name. I have a name. Kalen felt the words like a punch to the gut. State it, he commanded softly. Valera, she stammered. I am. Valera. Kaelin turned to Alara. The princess was staring at the dragon woman, at Valera, with her hand over her mouth. The bioluminescence on her skin had gone stark white. The translation software in her ear cuff would have picked up the syntax. She knew. She has a name, Ilara whispered. She spoke to you. She is a person, Kaelin said, his voice grim. She is a prisoner of war who has been modified, tortured, and put on display for your amusement. Still want a pet, Highness? Ilara looked at him, her eyes wide and wet. The cruelty of her own request hung in the air between them. She looked back at Valera, who was now trembling violently, having expended her remaining energy on the exchange. I did not know, Ilara repeated, but this time the defensive edge was gone. It was replaced by a hollow horror. Before Kaelin could answer, the lights in the showroom flickered. Gentle customers. Vex's voice oiled through the silence, but the warmth was gone. He stepped out from behind his podium, flanked by two large security droids that had unfolded from the ceiling. His crimson robe swished around his ankles. It seems we are having a translation issue. Kaelin shifted his stance instantly. His feet widened, his center of gravity dropped. He placed himself subtly between Ilara and the vendor. No issue, Kaelin said easily, though his muscles were coiled wire, just admiring the merchandise. You speak the old tongue, Vex noted, his eyes narrowing. A soldier's tongue. And you, princess, you seem distressed. Perhaps this specimen is too spirited for a royal household? Kaelin saw Vex's hand drift beneath the folds of his sleeve. A signal. The shop wasn't just a shop, it was a containment facility. And they had just poked the bear. We will take her, Ilara blurted out. Kaelin and Vex both looked at her. She had stepped out from behind Kaelin, her fear transmuted into a frantic, reckless determination. Her chin was up, her eyes glowing a fierce, defiant azure. I beg your pardon? Vex said, pausing. I said I will buy her, Ilara declared, her voice ringing with the imperious tone she used to command fleets of servants. Right now. 300,000? I will pay 500,000. Double it. 1 million credits. Transferable immediately to an off-world account. Vex's eyebrows shot up. 1 million credits was enough to buy a small moon. Greed warred with caution on his face. That is, a generous offer. Highness. However? No, however, Ilara snapped, stepping forward. She pulled a slender data wand from her sash. I have the authorization codes. I want this creature released from that cage and placed in my custody this instant. I am the third scion of the eternal throne. Do you deny me? It was a brave performance. Kaelin almost admired it. But he saw what she didn't. He saw Vex glance at a monitor on his desk, where a silent alarm was pulsing. It is not a matter of price, Vex said smoothly, his smile returning, tight and fake. There are protocols. This specimen is part of a reserved lot, sponsored by the Imperial Science Directorate. There are committees involved. Lord Vane himself has an interest in the genetic yield of this particular asset. Kaelin's blood ran cold. Lord Vane, the princess's uncle, the head of intelligence. This wasn't just a black market deal. This was a state-sanctioned black operation running under the guise of the criminal underworld. If Ilara walked out with Valera, she wouldn't just be buying a pet, she would be stealing evidence of high treason. We are leaving, Kaelin said, grabbing Ilara's shoulder. Keep your money, Vex. We changed our minds. Oh, I am afraid I cannot let you do that. Vex sighed. He tapped a command on his wrist. Entrapment is a serious crime. consultant, and purchasing restricted military assets? Even a princess might find that hard to explain to the High Council. I think it best if you both remain here while I contact proper authorities. The heavy blast doors behind them slammed shut with a finality that shook the floor. The two security droids raised their weapon arms, rotary cannons spinning up with a high-pitched whine. From the shadows of the ceiling, 4 automated turrets dropped down, red laser sights painting Kaylin's chest. Ilara froze. The reality of the violence facing her stripped away the royal veneer. She was just a young woman in a silk dress standing in a slaughterhouse. Kaylin moved. He didn't draw a weapon, he didn't have one yet. He moved with pure, fluid aggression. He stepped in close to Ilara, his left hand pressing flat against the small of her back. The contact was electric. Through the thin silk of her gown, he felt her muscles spasm with terror. "Move," he whispered. Ilara shivered. It wasn't just fear. The heat of his hand, the absolute certainty of his presence, grounded her. For the first time in her life, someone wasn't bowing to her, someone was commanding her to survive. She let him steer her, stumbling as he shoved her behind a heavy crate of supplies just as the air filled with the sizzling snap of laser fire. Bolts of red energy chewed into the floor where they had been standing. Kaylin crouched over her, his body a shield. "Stay down," he ordered. "What are you doing?" She shrieked as a laser blast slagged the corner of their cover. "Improvising." Kaylin grunted. He reached into his boot and pulled out a small, flat disc, not a weapon, but a data spike. He slammed it into the lock mechanism of a nearby service hatch. It wasn't the door control. It was the local subnet node for the cage systems. He didn't have time to slice the firewall. He just overloaded it. Kaylin punched in a brute force command. "Unlock all." The room erupted into chaos. It wasn't just Valera's cage. Every containment unit in the showroom and the adjacent corridor hissed open. From the tank on the far wall, the tentacled creature burst out in a spray of blue fluid. It shrieked, a sonic blast that shattered the remaining glass, and launched itself at the nearest security droid, wrapping its limbs around the machine's sensors. A 6-legged wolf beast, mad with hunger, leaped from its pen and tackled a reptilian guard, tearing into his armor. Vex screamed as the chaos engulfed his showroom. "Get them! Kill the human! Secure the asset!" In the confusion, the turrets wavered, their targeting algorithms overwhelmed by the sudden multiplicity of targets. Kaylin grabbed Ilara and hauled her up. "Run!" They sprinted through the smoke and debris. Kaylin didn't run away from the danger, he ran toward it. He sprinted straight for Valera's cage. The dragon woman was on her knees, the neural collar pulsing red, paralyzing her even as the glass wall slid open. She looked up at Kaylin, her eyes filled with a terrified resignation. She expected him to kill her, or worse, leave her. Kaylin vaulted over the low containment barrier. He landed beside her, his boots skidding on the wet metal. He grabbed the heavy black collar with both hands. "Don't move," he barked. He didn't have the key. He didn't have the code. He had a kinetic disruptor charge the size of a coin, hidden in his belt buckle for emergencies. He jammed it into the collar's receiver slot and twisted. There was a sharp crack, a flash of blue sparks, and the smell of ozone. The collar split open, falling from her neck with a heavy clang. Valera gasped, a ragged intake of air that sounded like a sob. She reached up, touching her raw throat, disbelief warring with instinct. "Get up!" Kaylin shouted, grabbing her arm. She was heavy, dense with muscle and bone, her skin hot to the touch. Valera flinched, pulling back, baring her teeth. Her tail whipped around, knocking over a tray of surgical tools. She scrambled backward into the corner of the cage, pressing herself against the wall. "No!" she hissed. "No masters, no more!" She didn't trust him. Why would she? He was another man in a uniform barking orders. Kalen reached for her again, but a laser bolt struck the cage frame inches from his head, showering them in sparks. He spun around, snatching a fallen stun baton from the floor to deflect the next shot. "We don't have time for this," Kalen yelled. Suddenly, Ilara was there. The princess scrambled over the barrier, her expensive dress torn at the hem, her hair wild. She ignored the laser fire. She ignored the screaming merchant. She dropped to her knees in the filth of the cage floor, right in front of the dragon woman. She didn't command. She didn't offer money. She held out her hand. Her palm was open, trembling slightly. Her eyes were wide, luminous, and filled with a desperate, pleading fear. Not fear of Valera, but fear for her. "Please," Ilara whispered, her voice cracking. "They will kill you. Please come with us, I promise. No chains, I promise." Valera stared at the hand. It was small, fragile, pale violet against the blood and grime of the cage. She looked up at Ilara's face. She saw the guilt there. She saw the horror. It was the first time in her life a royal had looked at her and seen a person. Valera's golden eyes narrowed, then softened. She reached out, her black talons enveloping Ilara's small hand. "Run," Valera rasped. Kalen hauled them both up as a squad of armored guards burst through the blast doors. "Go!" he roared, laying down a suppressing field with the stun baton, overloading its power cell to create a miniature EMP blast that scrambled the lead guard's visor. They ran. They burst out of the showroom into the labyrinthine corridors of the bazaar. The alarm was general now, a wailing siren that pulsed in time with the station's emergency lights. The crowd of shoppers had turned into a stampede. Kalen took point, moving with a lethal efficiency. He shoulder-checked a mercenary who tried to block their path, sending the alien sprawling. He kicked a crate of illicit fruit into the path of a pursuing drone. Behind him, Valera moved with a terrifying grace. She was weak, stumbling occasionally, but her instincts were coming online. When two guards tried to flank them from a side alley, Valera didn't need Kalen's warning. She inhaled, a deep, rattling breath that expanded her chest, and exhaled a short, violent burst of superheated plasma. The blue-white fire roared down the alley. It didn't have the range Vex had claimed. She was too malnourished, but the heat was intense enough to slag the guards' armor and send them diving for cover. Screaming, Ilara shrieked, shielding her face from the heat. "That is very bright! Keep moving!" Kalen yelled. Ilara fumbled with the sash of her dress and pulled out a small Jean Pearl-handled disruptor pistol, a lady's weapon, more jewelry than gun. She pointed it blindly behind her and pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, blowing a hole in a neon sign advertising Grogurt, raining sparks down on their pursuers. "Aim!" "Highness!" Kalen shouted over the din. "Aim before you shoot. I am trying," she yelled back, laughing breathlessly. It was a hysterical sound, born of adrenaline and terror. This is not how pet shopping was supposed to go. Valera, running between them, let out a snarl. "I am no pet," she roared, her voice gaining strength. "I will burn the tongue out of the next person who says that word. We can discuss terminology if we live past the next corridor." Kalen snapped, grabbing Ilara by the waist and throwing her around a corner just as a kinetic slug shattered the wall where her head had been. Into the maintenance shaft. He kicked open a rusted grate in the wall, revealing a dark, dripping tunnel that smelled of sewage and recycled coolant. "Ladies first," Kalen muttered, shoving Ilara inside. Ilara gagged as she crawled into the slime. "Ugh! This is royal silk. Vance, you are fired. I am rehiring you just so I can fire you again. Move!" Valera squeezed in next, her large wings scraping painfully against the narrow metal walls. She began to hyperventilate. The darkness, the tight space, it was too much like the transport crates. I cannot. Valera gasped, stopping. Too small. Cannot breathe. Kalen slid in behind her, pulling the grate shut and welding it with a quick blast from the stolen stun baton. He was pressed tight against Valera's back. He could feel the panic radiating off her. Valera, listen to me, Kalen said, his voice dropping to that calm command frequency. You are not in a crate. You are exiting. There is sky at the end of this. Do you understand? Sky. Sky, Valera repeated, the word a talisman. Keep moving. Follow the princess. They crawled through the filth for what felt like hours. The tunnel was a nightmare of dripping pipes and scurrying vermin. Ilara crawled ahead, her complaints dying down into a grim determination. Kalen watched her from behind. Her dress was ruined, covered in black grease. Her hair was matted, but she kept moving. Every few meters, she would stop and look back, her glowing eyes cutting through the gloom, checking on him. Are you coming? Vance, she would whisper. I am here, he would answer. In the tight confines, the physical reality of them was unavoidable. He was pressed against the dragon woman's scales, dodging her tail. Ahead, he watched the line of Ilara's back, the way her muscles worked as she dragged herself forward. It was intimate in a way the palace never allowed. Ilara paused at a junction, waiting for them. As Kalen caught up, she reached out and wiped a smudge of grease from his cheek. Her fingers lingered for a second on the scar tissue. Your arms are very hard, she noted, her voice trembling slightly. It is reassuring. Focus, Highness. Kalen grunted, though his pulse spiked. Above them, through the metal plating of the ceiling, a new sound echoed, not a siren, a ping, a unified, resonant tone that Kalen recognized instantly. He checked his wrist comp. It was dead, jammed by the station's security net. But he didn't need it to know what that sound meant. Vex hadn't just called the police. He had triggered the Imperial Asset Retrieval Protocol. They know, Kalen said grimly. Vex sent the signal. The palace knows we have her. Ilara went pale beneath the dirt on her face. My father. If we go back to the docks, the Royal Guard will be waiting, Kalen said. They will take her back, and they will likely arrest me. You will be escorted to your room and told to forget this ever happened. Ilara looked at Valera. The dragon woman was huddled in the tunnel, her wings wrapped around herself, eyes squeezed shut against the claustrophobia. No, Ilara said softly. No, I will not let them take her back. Kalen looked at the princess. He saw the shift. The spoiled girl who wanted a toy was gone. In her place was something sharper, harder. We are at the auxiliary docks, Kalen said. My shuttle is there. But if we launch, we are not going back to the palace. We are going rogue. Rogue? Ilara tested the word. We will be fugitives, Kalen clarified. Hunted by the Empire, hunted by the bounty hunters. No money, no servants, no safety. Ilara looked down at her ruined dress, then at Valera, then at Kalen. A slow, terrified but exhilarating smile spread across her face. I have always wanted a scandal, she breathed. It is not a scandal. Ilara, Kalen warned. It is treason, even better. They reached the grate at the end of the tunnel. Kalen kicked it out, and they spilled onto the deck of the private hangar. The black stealth shuttle sat there, a shadow against the stark white lights of the bay. But across the room, the main blast doors were beginning to cycle open. He could hear the heavy thud of mechanized infantry boots, Imperial Praetorians. Get in, Kalen shouted. He practically threw Ilara up the ramp. Valera scrambled after her, her claws gouging the metal decking. Kalen vaulted into the pilot's seat before the airlock even hissed shut. He didn't bother with pre-flight checks. He slammed the throttle forward. The shuttle screamed, its repulsor engines firing a shockwave that knocked the first squad of Praetorians off their feet as they breached the hangar. The ship tore through the atmospheric shield and shot out into the vacuum of space. Warning. The ship's computer droned. Unauthorized departure. Imperial Flight Control is locking missiles. Kalen's hands flew over the controls. He dumped the transponder. He engaged the stealth bafflers. He threw the ship into a violent spin to dodge the tractor beam sweeping from the station's hull. "Hold on!" he roared. The G-force slammed them into their seats as he punched the hyperdrive control. The stars outside stretched into lines of infinite light. The capital station, the gas giant, the Empire, all of it vanished in a streak of white. Silence filled the cockpit. Kalen let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for 3 years. He slumped slightly in his chair, staring at the swirling vortex of hyperspace. He had kidnapped the heir to the throne. He had stolen a top-secret biological weapon. He had defied the Emperor and the High Council. From the back of the cabin, he heard a rustle of silk and scales. "Are we safe?" Valera's voice asked, small and trembling. Kalen looked back. Ilara was sitting on the floor next to the dragon woman, her hand resting tentatively on Valera's knee. They both looked at him, eyes wide, waiting for him to tell them what happened next. Kalen turned back to the dark void ahead. "No," he said honestly. "We are definitely not safe." He punched in coordinates for a sector of space that didn't appear on Imperial maps, a graveyard of old ships and bad memories. "But we are free," he added softly. And for the first time since the war ended, Kalen Vance felt a spark of something that burned hotter than plasma. Purpose. The silence of the drift was not empty. It was heavy. A physical weight that pressed against the bulkheads of the stealth shuttle Wraith. Kalen had killed the main engine 6 hours ago, letting the ship drift on a ballistic trajectory through the carrion belt, a massive field of debris left over from the Second Battle of Orav. Outside the viewport, the spinning wreckage of capital ships drifted by like the bones of dead leviathans. Twisted girders of durasteel, shattered hull plates, and the frozen pressurized bubbles of escape pods that had never opened floated in the dark, obscuring their thermal signature from the long-range scanners sweeping the sector. Inside the cabin, the air was recycled and stale, smelling of ozone, unwashed bodies, and the sharp, metallic tang of anxiety. "Do not touch that," Kalen said without looking up from the sensor console. Ilara froze, her hand hovering inches from a sealed locker marked with hazardous material warnings. She pulled her hand back, smoothing the ruined silk of her gown with exaggerated dignity. "I was merely inspecting the inventory." She sniffed, drifting back toward the pilot's chair. "It is dreadfully boring in here, Vance, and I am hungry. The ration bar you gave me tasted like compressed dust." "It is compressed dust," Kalen muttered, his eyes glued to the passive sensor waterfall. "Dust with vitamins. It keeps you alive. That is its only job." Ilara sighed, a dramatic exhalation that seemed to take up half the oxygen in the small cabin. She leaned against the back of his chair, peering over his shoulder. Her bioluminescent markings were dim, a soft lavender pulsing with boredom. "You are a terrible host," she teased, her finger tracing the line of the headrest near his ear. "No music, no wine. And a captain who stares at static for 4 hours? Is this how humans court death? By boring it into submission?" "We are not courting death, Highness," Kalen said, his voice flat. "We are hiding from it. There is an Orithian hunter-killer wing sweeping Grid 7. If we light the drive, we flare on their scopes like a supernova. If we speak on the comms, they triangulate us. If we move too fast, the debris sensors tag us. So we sit, we eat dust, and we wait. He spun the chair around, fixing her with a hard look. And we do not touch the ordnance locker. Is that clear? Ilara pursed her lips, her eyes flashing with a spark of rebellion. You enjoy this, giving orders to a scion of the throne. I enjoy surviving, Kalen corrected. He stood up, moving past her with a brush of his shoulder that was careful to be impersonal, though the small space made it impossible to be entirely distant. He checked the environmental scrubbers, his movements precise and economic. In the rear of the cabin, the dragon woman was pacing. Valera could not sit still. The shuttle was too small. It reminded her of the transport crates, of the holding cells, of the crushing confinement of the lab. She walked the length of the cargo deck, 3 strides forward, turn, 3 strides back. Her wings were folded tight against her back, twitching with every step. Her tail swept the floor in a restless arc. She wore a spare flight suit Kalen had found in the locker. It was too short for her, the sleeves ending at her forearms, tight across her broad chest. But it covered her. She kept reaching up to touch her neck, her claws scraping against the skin where the collar had been. Kalen watched her. He saw the phantom pain in the way she flinched every time the ship's hull groaned under the stress of the drift. He walked over to her, moving slowly, hands open and visible. Valera stopped pacing. She tensed, her golden eyes locking onto him, pupils narrowing to slits. She expected a command. Sit, stay, attack. It is gone. Valera, Kalen said softly. Valera's hand went to her throat again. She rubbed the raw skin. I feel it, she rasped. The hum. It is waiting. It is phantom feedback, Kalen explained, keeping his voice low. The way one spoke to a spooked horse or a shell-shocked rookie. The nerves were compressed for a long time. They are misfiring, but the metal is gone. The receiver is smashed. No one can hurt you with a button anymore. Valera looked at him. She looked at his hands, expecting to see a remote. There was nothing. Why? She asked, her voice guttural. Why break it? You could have kept it. You could have owned. I do not own people, Kalen said firmly. Valera tilted her head, the motion avian and sharp. You are a soldier. Soldiers follow orders. You had the clicker. You had the power. Kalen sighed, leaning back against the bulkhead. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes were deep trenches of exhaustion. I had power once, he said. A lot of it. I had a squad. I had air support. I had orders that told me who to kill and why it was righteous. And I learned that power without conscience is just a fancy way of being a butcher. I am done with butcher's work. Valera absorbed this. She did not fully understand. Her life had been a series of brutalities justified by science. But she understood the tone. He was sad. The predator was sad. She lowered her hand from her neck. Her shoulders dropped an inch. Safe? She asked, testing the word. For now. Kalen nodded. Ilara watched them from the cockpit. She felt a strange, cold knot in her stomach. It was not hunger. It was exclusion. She watched the way Kalen spoke to the dragon woman, gentle, respectful, serious. He spoke to Ilara like she was a nuisance, a package to be delivered. She pushed off the pilot's chair and walked into the cargo area. The silk of her ruined dress swished around her ankles. She stopped a few feet from Valera. The size difference was intimidating. Valera towered over her, a creature of muscle and scale and lethal potential. Ilara felt small, fragile. But she straightened her spine. She was a princess of the eternal throne. She did not cower. She looked up at Valera's face. The golden eyes stared back, unblinking, cold as a reptile's. Ilara started, then faltered. She had been taught etiquette by the finest tutors in the empire. She knew how to address a duke, how to insult a rival with a compliment, how to order a fleet movement. She did not know how to apologize to a biological weapon she had tried to buy. "I am sorry," Ilara said. The words felt clumsy in her mouth. Valera stared at her. "Sorry? For the market," Ilara continued, gesturing vaguely. "For asking him to buy you. For calling you a pet." Valera made a low sound in her throat, a rumble that vibrated through the deck plates. "Pet," Valera repeated, the word dripping with disdain. "A thing to keep in a box, a thing to show friends. Look at the pretty scales, and look at the fire. I did not know," Ilara pleaded, stepping closer. "I truly did not know you were like this, like us. My tutors, the books, they said hybrids were just constructs, wetware droids. I thought I was buying a guard dog." "And if I was a dog?" Valera asked, stepping forward, looming over the princess. "If I had no words, if I could not beg, would the chain be okay then?" Ilara opened her mouth, then closed it. The question struck deep. She had never questioned the morality of owning a lesser being. It was simply the way of her world. The strong ruled, the beautiful possessed. "I do not know," Ilara whispered, her voice trembling. Valera looked at her for a long moment. She sniffed the air near Ilara, smelling the fear but also the sincerity. "You are soft," Valera decided, stepping back. "You would not make a good master. You would forget to feed the dog." Ilara let out a startled, breathless laugh. Yes. I suppose I might." Valera did not smile, but the tension in her wings eased. "Apology heard," the dragon woman said. "Not accepted. Not yet, but heard." Ilara nodded. It was more than she deserved. She felt a sudden, frantic need to bridge the gap, to fix the awkwardness with the social tools she understood. "Well," Ilara said, clapping her hands together, her voice taking on a forced brightness. "If we are to be shipmates, we cannot keep calling you Unit D7 or whatever that awful man said. And Dragon Woman is a bit literal, don't you think?" Valera blinked. "Literal is good. Literal is true. No. No. It lacks flair," Ilara insisted, her eyes lighting up. "You need a name that commands respect. A title? How about Valthra the Incinerator? Or Lady Scales of the Void?" Kalen snorted from the corner. "Lady Scales? Sounds like a skin condition." Ilara shot him a glare. "Hush. Vance, I am brainstorming. What about Empress of Ash?" Valera looked at Ilara as if the princess had grown a second head. "No," Valera said flatly. "No?" Ilara deflated slightly. "I have a name." Valera said, "I told the soldier. I am Valera." "Valera?" Ilara tested the word. "It is nice, but a bit plain. Are you sure you do not want something with more punch?" "I am Valera," she insisted, her chin lifting. "It is mine. I stole it from a data pad in the lab. It was the name of a storm on an old map, a storm that breaks cages." Kalen smiled. It was a small thing, barely a twitch of his lips, but it softened his scarred face. "Valera suits you," Kalen said. Ilara looked between them, feeling that pang of exclusion again. She wanted to be part of the inside joke. She wanted to be the one making Valera feel better. "Well," Ilara said, crossing her arms, If we are using names, I suppose you can call me Alara, not Highness. Just Alara. Valera looked at her. Elara. Sounds like a bird, a small, noisy bird. Ilara flushed pink. I am not noisy. Kalen chuckled, pushing off the wall. He walked over to the ration crate. We need to eat, he said, tossing a gray bar to Alara and another to Valera. Valera, you need calories. Your metabolism runs hot. Eat too. Valera sniffed the bar suspiciously, then bit into it, wrapper and all. Ilara peeled hers gingerly. Vance, do you have a first name? Or were you born simply as consultant? Kalen sat on a crate, chewing slowly. Kalen. My name is Kalen. Kalen, Ilara repeated. It sounds like stone grinding on stone. Very fitting. We used to have nicknames in the unit, Kalen said, trying to lighten the mood. The guys called me Spike because of the scar. Spike is dull, Ilara dismissed. We need something for Valera, a call sign, something short. Kalen looked at Valera, who was tearing through the second ration bar with terrifying speed. How about Torch? Kalen suggested. Because of the breath. Ilara's eyes went wide. She clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a giggle. Her face turned a deep, violet crimson. Kalen frowned. What? Is it bad? Ilara dissolved into laughter, leaning against the bulkhead for support. Oh, Vance. Oh, Kalen. You really do not speak High Orithian, do you? I speak trade, Kalen said defensively. And combat dialect, in High Orithian court slang. Ilara gasped, wiping tears from her eyes. The word torch. It implies, oh stars, it translates roughly to one who mates enthusiastically in public gardens. Kalen froze. He looked at Valera. Valera looked back, chewing, completely oblivious. Kalen felt a heat rising up his neck that had nothing to do with the ship's life support. Right. Kalen grunted. No nicknames. We stick to Valera. Ilara laughed until she hiccuped, and for a moment, the crushing weight of their situation lifted. For a moment, they were just three people in a metal box, trying to figure out how to speak to each other. Later, the mood darkened. Kalen sat at the comms station, headphones pressed to his ears, listening to the static. He had been scanning the encrypted bands, looking for news of their pursuit. He found it. He took the headphones off and laid them on the console. His face was grim. Ilara, he said. Come here. The princess moved to his side, sensing the shift in his demeanor. Valera crept closer, sensing the threat. What is it? Ilara asked. I picked up a burst transmission on the Imperial Navy frequency, Kalen said. It is encrypted, but I recognize the header. It is a crimson-level priority tag. He tapped the screen, showing a jagged waveform. It is an asset retrieval order, he explained. Vex's report went straight to the top. They are not just looking for a thief, they are looking for a traitor. Ilara leaned in, squinting at the code scrolling on the screen. She gasped, her finger pointing to a string of hexadecimal characters. There, she whispered. That signature, the double helix seal. You know it? It belongs to High Counselor Vorian, Ilara said, her voice shaking. My father's oldest friend, his chief advisor. Kalen nodded slowly. That confirms it. The hybrid program is not some rogue operation in the Undercity. It is state-sponsored. Vorian is running it. And if Vorian is running it... My father knows, Ilara finished, her voice hollow. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. The realization seemed to physically shrink her. She had spent her life believing the Empire was a beacon of civilization, flawed perhaps, but ultimately noble. Now, the foundation was rotting beneath her feet. He knows, she whispered. He signed the checks. He approved the labs. He approved her. She looked at Valera, who was watching the screen with uncomprehending intensity. I cannot go back, Ilara said. If you go back, they will silence you, Kalen said bluntly. You are a loose end now. Vorian will say you were brainwashed by the human mercenary. Or he will arrange an accident, a shuttle crash, a poisoning. Ilara looked at him terrified. But my father, surely he would not. Power does strange things to men. Ilara, Kalen said, I have seen generals shell their own positions to save a map. Then what do we do? Ilara asked, her voice rising in panic. We cannot run forever. This ship has fuel for 2 weeks, food for 1. We are dead in the water. We hide, Kalen said. We find a rock in the outer rim and we go dark. No, Valera said. The voice was quiet, but it cut through the panic like a blade. Valera stepped up to the console. She pointed a clawed finger at the waveform. They are hunting, she said. They will make more of me. More cages. Kalen looked at her. We cannot stop them. Valera, it is the Empire. It is an entire government. We are 3 people in a stolen shuttle. Hiding does not stop the pain, Valera insisted, her eyes burning. I hid in my mind for cycles. It did not stop the needles. We must bite back. Kalen rubbed his face with his hands. He looked at the dragon woman, then at the princess. He saw the desperation in both of them, and he felt the old ghost of his own guilt rising up. He stood up and walked to the viewport. He stared at the drifting wreckage of the war. I was part of a unit, Kalen said to the glass, the 105th Raiders. We specialized in deep insertion, sabotage, recon. He paused, the memory tasting like ash. Near the end of the war, we hit a facility on the moon of Tyros. It wasn't a military base. It was a lab. We found things, failed experiments, hybrids that didn't work, piles of them. Ilara made a small, horrified sound. We had orders to destroy the facility, Kalen continued, his voice devoid of emotion. Deny the enemy the asset. So we rigged the charges. We blew it. But we didn't look at the files. We didn't ask who was funding it. We just followed orders. We said it was above our pay grade. He turned to face them. I walked away. I let it happen. I told myself it was war. But it wasn't war. It was slaughter. And because I didn't ask questions then, you were in that cage today. Valera. He looked at the dragon woman. I am sorry, he said. Valera looked at him. She didn't offer forgiveness. She just nodded, acknowledging the debt. So we pay the debt, Valera said. Kalen took a deep breath. He looked at Ilara. There is a place, he said, not far from here. The world of Orav Prime. It was a frontline world and it was bombed back to the Stone Age. But there is a monastery there. The Order of the Silent Keepers. I know of them, Ilara said. They are neutral, archivists. They collect truth, Kalen said. They sweep the battlefields for data cores, hard drives, flight recorders. They preserve history so it cannot be rewritten. If there is proof of Vorian's involvement, funding trails, communication logs, authorization orders, it might be in their vaults. And if we find it, Ilara asked. Then you have a weapon, Kalen said. You can broadcast it. You can expose them. You can force the High Council to act. Or you can use it to bargain for your life. Ilara looked at the star map. She looked at the red dot of Orav Prime. It was a dead world, a graveyard. I do not want to bargain, Ilara said softly. I want to burn it down. Kaelin adjusted the course. The Wraith fired its maneuvering thrusters, turning away from the debris field and toward the hyperlane that led to Orav Prime. The ship shuddered violently as they passed through a density wave of dust. The artificial gravity flickered. Ilara, who had been standing near the bulkhead, lost her footing. She stumbled, crying out as the deck tilted. Kaelin lunged from the pilot's seat, catching her before she hit the metal frame of the door. His arm went around her waist, pulling her hard against his chest to stabilize her. They froze there. The cabin was dim, lit only by the red emergency lights. The ship vibrated around them. Ilara was pressed full body against him. He could feel the rapid beat of her heart against his ribs. She smelled of cinnamon and fear and expensive silk. She looked up at him. Her face was inches from his. Her eyes were wide, the bioluminescence flaring a soft, breathless pink. Kaelin looked down. He saw the pulse in her throat. He saw the specks of gold in her blue irises. He should let go. The ship was stable. He should step back and apologize. He didn't. His hand tightened on her waist. "You should strap in," Kaelin said, his voice rougher than he intended. "It is going to be bumpy." Ilara didn't move. She rested her hands on his chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of his flight suit. "You are very solid, Kaelin," she whispered, "for a human." "And you are very light," he murmured, "for a royal." She let out a shaky laugh. "My heart is racing. I think you humans need to take responsibility for the effect you have on our physiology. It is quite rude." Kaelin swallowed. Duty warred with desire. He was a mercenary. She was a princess. He was 35 and scarred. She was 20 and glowing. It was impossible. It was wrong. It is just the adrenaline. "Highness," Kaelin said, though he didn't pull away. "Are you sure?" Ilara whispered, leaning a fraction closer. "Are you mating partners?" The voice cut through the moment like a plasma cutter. Kaelin and Ilara sprang apart as if they had been burned. They spun around to find Valera standing in the doorway, watching them with curious, unblinking eyes. "What?" Kaelin choked out. "No!" Ilara squeaked, smoothing her dress frantically. "No, absolutely not. We were just stabilizing. It was a safety maneuver." Valera tilted her head. "In the lab, the manuals said that close physical proximity, elevated heart rates, and dilated pupils indicate mating behavior. You were doing all three." "We were not," Kaelin said, his face burning. "It was turbulence." Valera looked skeptical. "Turbulence makes you grab the female's reproductive zone?" "Waist!" Kaelin shouted, exasperated. It was her waist. Ilara covered her face with her hands. "Oh, stars. Valera, please. It is complicated. Humans and Orithians, we have protocols, and he is my employee. And do you want to mate?" Valera asked bluntly. Ilara lowered her hands. She looked at Kaelin. The air in the room grew sudden and thick. Kaelin looked at Ilara. He saw the question in her eyes, the longing. "It is not about what we want," Kaelin said quietly, his voice tight. "It is about what is smart and what is right." Valera snorted. Too many words. "In the wild, if the dragon wants the mate, she takes him. If he agrees, they fly. Simple. We are not dragons." "Valera," Kaelin said, turning back to the controls. "Strap in. We are jumping in 5 minutes." Ilara sat in the co-pilot seat as the stars stretched into infinity. She watched Kaelin's profile, the hard line of his jaw, the focus in his eyes. "Kaelin," she said softly. He didn't look at her. "Yes, we are going to Orav Prime. We are going to find the truth. And then I have to be a princess again. I have to fight my father. I have to be a symbol. Yes, Kalen said. But before we get there, Ilara said, reaching out to touch his arm, I need you to promise me something. Kalen looked at her hand, then up to her face. What? If it goes wrong, Ilara said, if the conspiracy is too big, if they come for me, promise me you will choose me. I am protecting you. Ilara, that is the job. No. She shook her head. Not the job, not the contract, not the asset. Choose me, Ilara. Even if it means letting the Empire burn, even if it means we run and never look back. Promise me you will save the girl, not the crown. Kalen looked at her. He saw the terror behind the bravado. She was asking him to put her life above the greater good, above justice, above the mission. It was a selfish request. And God help him. He knew the answer. I promise, Kalen said hoarsely. Ilara smiled. It was a sad, small smile. Thank you. Kalen took the first watch while the ship autopiloted through the hyperlane. Ilara had curled up in the co-pilot chair, exhausted, in the back. Valera slept on a pile of cargo blankets. Kalen watched the monitors, his mind racing. He was leading them into a war zone. He was leading them into the past. Suddenly, a cry rang out from the back. No, no fire, the chains. Kalen was out of his chair in a second. He rushed to the back. Valera was thrashing in her sleep. Her wings beat against the floor, knocking over crates. Her claws scrabbled at the air. She was hyperventilating, smoke curling from her nostrils. No, don't cut, don't cut! Kalen dropped to his knees beside her. He didn't grab her, that would trigger a fight response. He placed a hand firmly on her shoulder, avoiding the neck. Valera, Kalen said, his voice low and steady. Valera, wake up. She snarled, her eyes snapping open. They were wild, seeing not the ship, but the lab. She lunged, her hand grabbing Kalen's wrist, her grip crushing. Kalen didn't pull away. He didn't fight back. He stayed still. You are on the Wraith, he said calmly, though his wrist bone groaned under the pressure. You are safe. You are free. I am Kalen. Look at me. Valera blinked, her pupils focused. She saw the scar on his face. She smelled the recycled air. Kalen, she whispered. I am here, he said. It was a dream, just a memory. It cannot hurt you. Valera released his wrist. She looked down, ashamed. I am broken, she whispered. The machine is broken. You are not a machine, Kalen said, rubbing his bruising wrist. You are hurt. There is a difference. Machines don't heal. You will? He shifted, sitting on the floor beside her. He didn't leave. He stayed there, his shoulder pressing against her arm, a solid point of contact in the dark. Go back to sleep. Torch, he whispered, using the nickname despite himself. I have the watch. Nothing gets past me. Valera looked at him. She let out a long breath of smoke. She laid her head back down, but she kept one hand on his knee, anchoring herself. From the doorway of the cockpit, Ilara watched. She stood in the shadows, her arms wrapped around herself. She saw the tenderness in Kalen's posture. She saw the way he let the dragon woman crush his wrist without flinching. She felt a stab of jealousy, sharp and hot. But beneath it, she felt something else. When she had asked for a pet, she had wanted something to own, something to control. But watching Kalen sit in the dark with a nightmare-ridden monster, she realized she had been wrong. She didn't want a pet. She wanted that. She wanted someone who would sit in the dark with her. Someone who would hold her when the nightmares came. Someone who didn't care about the crown or the dress or the protocol. She backed away silently, leaving them to the quiet and returned to the cockpit. She stared at the stars, and for the first time, she felt truly deeply lonely. "Computer," she whispered to the empty room. "How long to Orav Prime? Estimated arrival in 4 hours." The computer droned. "Good," Ilara said, wiping a tear from her cheek. "Let us go find some ghosts." Orav Prime was a graveyard of giants. As the stealth shuttle Wraith descended through the atmospheric turbulence, the view screen was filled with the jagged skeletal remains of a planetary war. Once, this world had been a verdant garden colony. Now, it was a rust-colored expanse of craters and collapsed megastructures. The wind here did not howl. It shrieked through the hollowed-out ribs of fallen starships that littered the plains like the carcasses of metallic whales. Kalen Vance brought the shuttle in low, skimming the surface of a poisoned ocean that shimmered with an oily, iridescent sheen. "There," Kalen said, pointing to the horizon. Rising from the dust storm was a shape that defied logic. It was a Dreadnought-class battleship, an ancient behemoth from the early days of the conflict, driven nose-first into the crust of the planet. It stood like a monolith, its stern towering 3,000 feet into the gray sky. Lights flickered along its spine. It was no longer a weapon of war. It was a hive. "The Monastery of the Silent Keepers," Kalen announced as the landing gear deployed with a mechanical groan. Ilara leaned forward, her eyes wide. She had read about the Keepers in her history tablets, an order of monastic archivists composed of exiles and pacifists from a dozen species, dedicated to preserving the objective truth of history in a galaxy addicted to propaganda. "They live inside a warship?" Ilara asked, clutching the back of the pilot's seat. "It is ironic," Kalen noted as he initiated the landing sequence. "They say the safest place to keep the truth is inside the thing that tried to destroy it." Valera stood in the back, her wings tight against her body. She was trembling again, but not from fear. The air of this planet tasted of old violence. Even through the shuttle's filtration systems, she could smell the lingering psychic residue of death. "We are walking on bones," Valera whispered. Kalen set the ship down on a landing pad welded to the side of the Dreadnought's hull. The maglocks engaged with a heavy thud. "Hoods up," Kalen ordered, checking the charge on his stun baton. "We are guests, but this is still a lawless sector." They disembarked into the biting wind. A welcoming committee was waiting for them by the massive airlock. They were not soldiers. They were figures draped in heavy robes of coarse, undyed wool, their faces obscured by respirators and cybernetic optical implants. One of the figures stepped forward. It was a tall, four-armed insectoid creature, a Takakar, its chitinous shell painted with white symbols of peace. Kalen Vance, the Takakar clicked, its translator buzzing. "The ghost of Xylos returns. We thought you were dead. I am hard to kill." "High Archivist," Kalen replied, offering a traditional open palm salute. "We seek sanctuary and access." The Archivist's multiple eyes shifted to Ilara and Valera. "You bring a royal scion and a chimera. This is a dangerous party, ghost." "We bring truth," Ilara said, stepping forward. She pulled back her hood. The wind whipped her silver hair around her face, and her bioluminescent markings flared bright against the gloom. "I am Ilara of House Vane, third scion of the Eternal Throne. I invoke the right of diplomatic immunity. I demand entry to the vaults." The archivist paused, its mandibles clicking softly. "Immunity holds no weight here, Princess. But curiosity does. Enter." The interior of the Dreadnought was a cathedral of technology. The missile silos had been converted into data stacks, towering columns of servers that hummed with a low, Gregorian chant of cooling fans. Holographic scrolls floated in the air, detailing the histories of dead civilizations and forgotten battles. They walked for 20 minutes through the labyrinthine corridors until they reached the deep archive. "Here," Kalen said, plugging a data spike into a console. "This is the Black Sector. Records of covert operations, unauthorized funding, and war crimes." Ilara stood by his side as the holographic display flared to life. Valera hung back, watching the data streams with a wary suspicion. "Search for Project Chimera," Kalen commanded the system. The screen cascaded with red text. Files began to open: schematics, biological maps, funding requests. It was worse than they imagined. The records detailed a 20-year collaboration between a splinter faction of the Orithian High Council and a consortium of human arms dealers. The goal was to create a super soldier capable of operating in high radiation zones where organic troops failed and droids malfunctioned. Valera stared at the screen as a rotating 3D model of a dragon-human hybrid appeared. "Subject Series D," the file read. "Designation Tactical Asset. Projected lifespan 5 years when intelligence level restricted on status expendable." Valera made a sound that was half sob, half growl. She reached out, her claw hovering over the words. "Loyalty-bonded pet. Pet," she rasped. "It is in the file. It is the official classification." "Read the conditioning protocols," Kalen said, his voice grim. Ilara read the scrolling text aloud, her voice trembling. "Subjects are to be conditioned using a pain-reward cycle. Positive reinforcement is strictly prohibited to prevent emotional attachment. Touch is to be used only for correction or deployment commands." Ilara felt bile rise in her throat. She scrolled down to the funding page. She needed to know who paid for the pain. The screen displayed a list of benefactors. At the top of the list, stamped with the digital seal of a golden hawk, was the name House Vane. Ilara froze. The hawk was her family crest. "It is a mistake," she whispered. Kalen leaned in, his face hard. "Look at the authorization signature. Ilara." It was her father's signature, the same elegant looping script she had seen on birthday cards and royal decrees. "He paid for it," Ilara choked out. "He paid for the cages, he paid for the collars." Valera turned away from the screen. She looked at Ilara, her golden eyes burning with a sudden, blinding rage. "You're gold," Valera hissed. She stepped closer, her wings flaring out, casting a shadow over the princess. "Your family bought the electricity that burned my throat. You live in a palace built on my blood." "Valera." "Wait," Kalen started, stepping between them. "Do not tell me to wait." Valera roared, and for a moment, the fire in her throat flared visible and hot. "You stand there, soldier. You knew. You said you raided the labs. You saw us, and you left us. You let them pack us into crates like meat." "I did," Kalen admitted, his voice quiet but steady. He did not flinch from her rage. "I was a coward. I followed orders because it was easier than fighting the whole world. I own that. I carry that every day." "And you?" Valera spun on Ilara. "You wanted a pet. You wanted to buy me. You are no different than the man in the market. You just wanted a prettier chain." "I didn't know," Ilara sobbed, tears streaming down her face, glowing with the bioluminescence of her distress. "They kept me in the garden. I never looked at the ledgers." "Ignorance is not innocence," Valera screamed. "It is just a comfortable way to be guilty." The silence that followed was deafening. The hum of the servers seemed to mock them. Ilara sank to her knees, the cold metal of the deck biting into her skin. She looked up at the dragon woman, her face wet and ruined. "You are right," Ilara whispered. "It is not enough to say I didn't know. It is worthless." She looked at her hands. soft, manicured hands that had never worked a day in her life. "So tell me," Ilara said, her voice finding a sudden steel core. "Tell me what to do. How do I burn it down? How do I make it right? Not with money, not with words, real blood. Tell me." Valera looked down at the princess. The rage in her chest was still boiling, but the sight of the royal on her knees, begging for a way to atone, cooled the fire just enough. Valera looked at Kaelin. "We fight," Valera said. "We take this truth, and we shove it down their throats until they choke on it." Kaelin nodded. He looked at Valera's hands, which were clenched into fists. "Valera," he said gently. "The file. It said touch was only used for pain." Valera flinched. "Yes, that is why you pulled away in the ship," Kaelin realized. "Why you sleep in the corner. You think every hand is a weapon." Valera looked at her own scales. She had never known a touch that wasn't a prelude to violence or a demand for obedience. "I do not know." "Other ways," she admitted, her voice small. Ilara stood up slowly. She wiped her face. "We can teach you," Ilara said softly. "If you want, not now, not until you are ready. But touch can be just touch. It can be a promise." Valera looked at Ilara's hand, hovering in the air between them. She remembered the hand in the cage, the hand that had offered freedom. "Not yet," Valera said, stepping back. "My skin still remembers the shock. Give me time, all the time you need," Kaelin promised. The heavy atmosphere hung over them, thick with trauma and revelation. Ilara looked around the dusty, vaulted room. She hated the silence. She hated the sadness in Valera's eyes. She needed to fix it, even in a small, stupid way. "We need an oath," Ilara declared suddenly. Kaelin blinked. "A what? An oath? A ceremony. In the old stories before the knights went into battle, they swore a bond. Ilara, we are not knights," Kaelin sighed. "We are two fugitives and a political liability." "I don't care," Ilara insisted, grabbing a rusted strut and dragging it to the center of the aisle. "Come here. Stand in a circle." Valera looked at Kaelin. "Is she malfunctioning?" "Just humor her," Kaelin muttered, stepping into the circle. Ilara grabbed Kaelin's right hand and Valera's left claw. She forced them to complete the circle. "Repeat after me," Ilara commanded, trying to sound regal despite her tear-stained face. "We are the Order of the Broken Cage." Kaelin groaned. "That is terrible." "It is descriptive," Ilara snapped. "Say it." "We are the Order of the Broken Cage," Kaelin mumbled. Valera looked at the hands holding hers. She felt the warmth of Ilara's skin and the calloused roughness of Kaelin's palm. It was strange. It was terrifying. "We are the Order of the Broken Cage," Valera repeated softly. "We promise," Ilara continued, her voice gaining strength, "to choose each other, to fight for the one next to us, and to never ever wear a leash again." "Never," Valera said, and this time the word was a growl of absolute certainty. "Never." Kaelin agreed. They stood there for a moment, a strange triad in the heart of a dead warship. And for a second, the crushing weight of the galaxy felt a little lighter. Then the alarm screamed. The sound was a piercing electronic shriek that echoed through the dreadnought's hull. The holographic screens flashed from blue to crimson. "Alert! Alert! Perimeter breach!" Kaelin dropped their hands and spun to the console. He tapped into the external sensors. "Damn it!" he cursed. "They found us." On the screen, the sky above the monastery was filled with dropships. They were sleek, black, and marked with the Imperial seal. A heavy cruiser hung in low orbit, its cannons trained on the crash site. A voice cut over the monastery's comms system. a cold, amplified voice that seemed to shake the dust from the ceiling. Attention. This is Commander Rax of the Imperial Guard. We have tracked the stolen asset and the abducted royal to this location. Surrender them immediately, or we will commence orbital bombardment. You have 10 minutes. Ilara stared at the screen. Abducted? They are spinning the narrative, Kalen said, checking his pistol. If you are kidnapped, you are a victim. If you are with us willingly, you are a traitor. They are giving your father a way to save face while they kill us. A personal message pinged on Ilara's datapad. It was tagged with her father's private encryption. She opened it with trembling fingers. A hologram of the Emperor appeared. He sat on the eternal throne, looking regal and grave. Ilara, my star, the hologram spoke. I know you are frightened. The human mercenary has confused you. He is using you. Come home. The beast he travels with is dangerous. Walk away from them, and the guard will bring you to safety. Do not force my hand. It sounded perfect. It sounded loving. It sounds like a press release, Ilara whispered, shattering the hologram with her thumb. He isn't talking to me. He is talking to the history books. Kalen looked at her. We have to move. 10 minutes is not a negotiation window, it is targeting time. The High Archivist skittered into the room, its multiple limbs clattering. They are jamming our transmission. The Archivist clicked. We cannot upload the files to the galactic net. We are cut off. We need a signal booster, Kalen said. I can fly, Valera said. They looked at her. The interference is coming from the cruiser. Valera pointed to the schematic. If I get above the atmospheric scattering layer, I can breathe fire at their drones. I can clear a path. It is suicide, Kalen said. They have tracking missiles. I am Series D, Valera said, her lips curling into a fierce smile. I was built to intercept missiles. Let me do what I was made for. But this time, I do it for us. Kalen hesitated, then nodded. He looked at Ilara. Can you hack the local array? If Valera clears the jammer drones, can you punch the signal through? Ilara looked at the massive banks of servers. I can try. I can override the safeties and turn the whole dreadnought into a transmitter. Do it, Kalen ordered. I will take the monks. We will hold the ground entrance. The battle for the Iron Saint began with thunder. Imperial dropships roared over the canyon, unleashing a barrage of kinetic slugs that sparked against the dreadnought's ancient armor. Kalen stood at the airlock breach, flanked by 20 warrior monks armed with plasma rifles that looked as old as the ship itself. Hold the line! Kalen roared as the first wave of Imperial shock troopers rappelled down from the hovering ships. He fired his stolen pulse rifle, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. A trooper went down. Beside him, a monk fell, chest blown open. Outside, the sky turned into fire. Valera launched herself from the upper gantry. She didn't fly like a bird, she flew like a fighter jet. Her wings snapped open, catching the updraft, and she rocketed upward. 2 hunter-killer drones swiveled to track her. Missiles locked. Valera dove, spiraling through the air. The missiles trailed her. She waited until the last second, then pulled up, her G-force tolerance exceeding anything organic. She opened her mouth and unleashed a torrent of plasma. The blue-white fire incinerated the first drone. She whipped her tail around, smashing the second one out of the sky. She roared, a sound that shook the dropships. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the fire in her throat. She loved it. It was hers. Deep inside the archives, Ilara was fighting a different war. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface. Sparks rained down from the ceiling as the orbital bombardment began to hammer the hull. Come on. Come on, she muttered. Encryption strength, 80%. She needed more power. She ripped a panel off the server tower and manually crossed the conduits. Warning, system overheat. Burn, damn you, Ilara screamed, jamming the connection home. Suddenly, the heavy blast doors behind her hissed open. Ilara spun around, expecting Kalen. It wasn't Kalen. Walking into the archive was a tall, elegant Orithian man wearing the silver robes of the royal advisors. He held a disruptor pistol loosely in one hand. His face was kind, paternal, and utterly terrifying. Lord Cassian. Ilara breathed. He was her mentor. He had taught her diplomacy. He had taught her how to dance. He had been the one to dry her tears when her mother died. Ilara, Cassian said, his voice smooth as silk. Step away from the console. Child. You are with them, Ilara said, backing up until she hit the server bank. I am with the Empire, Cassian corrected gently. As are you. This is a tantrum, Ilara, a dangerous, expensive tantrum. But it can end now. He took a step forward. Give me the drive, Cassian said, holding out his hand. We will wipe the servers. We will take the creature into custody, humanely, of course, and the human will be repatriated, and you and I will go home. You can have tea in the garden. You can forget all this ugliness. It was a tempting lie. Ilara could feel the pull of it, the safety, the return to a world where she didn't have to smell blood and ozone. She looked at Cassian's kind eyes. Then she looked at the screen, where the file on Project Chimera was paused. She thought of Valera's scars. She thought of Kalen's guilt. He promised to choose me. Ilara thought, I have to choose them. No, Ilara said. Cassian sighed. He looked genuinely sad. I was afraid of that. He raised the pistol. Ilara, I cannot let you broadcast those files. It would destabilize the sector. Millions would die in the resulting civil war. One life is a small price to pay for order. He wasn't going to stun her. He was going to kill her. Wait! The shout came from the doorway. Kalen burst in, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his rifle smoking. Drop it! Cassian! Kalen yelled, raising his weapon. Cassian didn't hesitate. He was faster than he looked. He spun and fired. Kalen dove. But he was exposed. Ilara didn't think. She didn't weigh the political ramifications. She didn't consider her survival odds. She saw the man she loved. Yes, she admitted it now. She loved him, about to die. She threw herself in front of the beam. The disruptor bolt caught her in the side. It was a glancing blow, not a center mass hit, but the energy impact spun her around and threw her against the server rack. Ilara, Kalen screamed. The sight of the princess falling broke Cassian's composure for a split second. That second was all Kalen needed. He fired a single, precise shot to the chest. Cassian crumpled, a look of surprise on his face as he slid to the floor. Kalen was at Ilara's side in an instant. He ripped off his scarf and pressed it against the wound on her ribs. The fabric sizzled against the burnt silk and skin. Ilara, look at me, Kalen shouted, his voice cracking with panic. Ilara gasped, clutching his arm. It hurt. It hurt more than anything she had ever felt. But she was alive. Did I do it right? She wheezed, her teeth stained with blood. The shielding maneuver? You are an idiot, Kalen choked out, pressing harder on the wound. A brave, stupid idiot. Above them, the console chimed. Jamming signal cleared. Upload complete. Ilara smiled, her head lolling back against Kalen's shoulder. Good, she whispered. Now. Let them try to spin that. Outside, Valera let out a shriek of triumph as the Imperial cruiser suddenly broke orbit, its comms flooded with the undeniable proof of its own corruption. The dropships hesitated, then turned to flee. The battle for the Iron Saint was over, but the war for the truth had just begun. The smoke had finally cleared from the lower atmosphere of Orav Prime, leaving the sky a bruised, sullen purple. The Iron Saint, the ancient dreadnought-turned monastery, groaned in the cooling air, its metal skeleton settling deeper into the planetary crust. The attack had ceased. The Imperial dropships withdrawing like a swarm of angry wasps denied their sting. But the silence they left behind was not peaceful. It was precarious, a held breath before a scream. Inside the medical bay of the monastery, the lighting was low, provided by emergency glow rods that cast long, flickering shadows against the curved bulkheads. The air smelled of ozone, burnt circuitry, and the sharp medicinal tang of antiseptic gel. Kalen Vance stood over the biobed, his hands hovering over the princess's side. "Hold still," he murmured, his voice rough with a fatigue that went deeper than his bones. "I am holding still," Ilara hissed through her teeth, her fingers gripping the edge of the mattress until her knuckles turned white. "It is your hands that are shaking." "Vance." Kalen froze. She was right. A fine tremor ran through his fingers, the aftershock of adrenaline and terror. He looked down at the wound on her flank. The disruptor bolt had grazed her, searing through the silk of her dress and burning a jagged line across her ribs. It was an ugly, angry red mark against the pale violet perfection of her skin. He squeezed a dollop of blue med gel onto his fingers. It was cool to the touch. "This will sting," he warned. "It already stings," she countered, though her voice lacked its usual imperious bite. He applied the gel. His hands, scarred and calloused from a lifetime of holding rifles and digging trenches, moved with a surprising, reverence-filled gentleness. He traced the line of the burn, coating the damaged skin. He could feel the heat radiating from her, the feverish warmth of her biology reacting to the trauma. Ilara watched him work. Her bioluminescence was dim, a soft, pulsating indigo that betrayed her exhaustion. She lay half-exposed, her ruined dress pushed down to her waist to allow him access. In the court of the Orithian Empire, for a commoner, a human no less, to touch a scion of the throne in such a way would be punishable by death. "You are seeing too much royal skin." "Consultant," she whispered, trying to summon a joke to cover the sudden, overwhelming intimacy of the moment. "I should charge you an admission fee." Kalen did not smile. He did not look up. He kept his eyes focused on her ribs, applying a sterile bandage over the gel. "I saw you jump in front of a disruptor bolt," he said, his voice low and tight. "That is what I saw. I saw you try to die. I was shielding you," she defended, wincing as he pressed the adhesive tape down. "It was a tactical maneuver. You said I needed to learn tactics. It was idiocy," Kalen snapped. The anger flared up, hot and sudden, masking the fear that had been clawing at his throat for the last hour. "You are the VIP. I am the security detail. You do not take the bullet for the bodyguard. Ilara, that is not how the math works." Ilara pushed herself up on one elbow, ignoring the pain. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She saw the grime in the lines around his eyes, the dried blood on his temple, the way his jaw was set so hard it looked like granite. "I did not do the math." "Kalen," she said softly. "I just moved." Kalen finished the bandage. He wiped his hands on a rag, refusing to meet her gaze. He felt stripped raw. In 10 years of war, he had lost friends, commanders, and pieces of his own soul. But when he saw Cassian raise that pistol, when he saw Ilara throw herself into the line of fire, he had felt a coldness that eclipsed every winter on the ice moons. "You almost died," he whispered, the confession torn out of him. He turned away, leaning heavily against the metal counter, his head bowing between his shoulders. I almost lost you, and it terrified me. More than the war, more than the labs. It scared the life out of me. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Ilara watched his back. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the way he was holding himself together by sheer force of will. The fear he spoke of, she felt it too. But underneath the fear, underneath the pain in her side, there was something else, a clarity. The near miss with death had burned away the pretenses, the titles, the silly games they played. She sat up fully, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. The movement made her head spin, but she pushed through it. "Kalen," she said. He didn't turn. Ilara slid off the bed. Her bare feet touched the cold metal floor. She took 2 steps and reached out, placing her hand on his back, right between his shoulder blades. He stiffened, but he didn't pull away. "Do you know why I asked you for a pet?" she asked quietly. Kalen let out a harsh breath. "Because you were bored. Because you wanted a trophy." "No," she said. She rested her forehead against his back. He was solid, warm, smelling of smoke and old leather. "I asked for a pet because pets cannot leave," she confessed. Her voice was small, stripped of all royal affectation, in the palace. "Everyone leaves. My mother died. My brother went to war and came back in a box. My friends are all rivals waiting for me to fail. My father is a hologram who signs death warrants." She felt Kalen's breathing hitch. "I wanted something that was mine," she continued, tears leaking from her eyes to soak into his jacket. "Something that was bound to me, something that would stay, even if I was difficult, even if I was flawed, even if I wasn't the perfect scion they all wanted. I just wanted to not be alone in that room anymore." She laughed, a wet, self-deprecating sound. It sounds so childish now. "I look at Valera, and I see how cruel it was. I wanted to change something just so I could feel loved. It is pathetic." Kalen turned around slowly. He looked down at her. She looked small in the dim light, her silver hair messy, her face streaked with grime and tears. She didn't look like a princess. She looked like a lonely girl who had almost gotten herself killed trying to save the one thing that was real in her life. "It is not pathetic," Kalen said gently. "It is lonely. There is a difference." He reached out, his hand hesitating for a fraction of a second before cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed away a tear. His skin was rough against hers, a contrast that made her shiver. "But people are not pets. Ilara," he said. "You cannot leash loyalty. You cannot chain affection. If you do, it is just fear wearing a collar." "I know," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "I know that now." "I get it, though," Kalen admitted, his voice dropping to a rumble. "I understand the need. I spent 3 years after the war drifting. No unit, no orders, just me and the ghosts. I didn't want a pet, but I wanted a reason to stay in one place, a reason to not put the gun in my mouth." He looked into her eyes, exposing his own damage, his own broken edges. "I was afraid too. Ilara, I am still afraid. I am a burnt-out soldier with too much blood on his ledger. I am too broken to be good for anyone, especially you." "You are not broken," Ilara said fiercely, grabbing his wrist. "You are scarred. Scars mean you survived. Scars mean you healed." She looked up at him, her eyes searching his. The distance between them, physically, socially, biologically, seemed to vanish. There was only the heat of their bodies and the desperate magnetic pull of 2 people who had found their anchor in the storm. I do not want a pet, Kaylin, she breathed, her gaze dropping to his mouth. I want you, and I do not have a leash. I only have me. Kaylin made a low sound in his throat, a sound of surrender. That is enough, he growled. That is everything. He lowered his head. She rose on her tiptoes. The kiss was not graceful. It was not the chaste, courtly kiss of a storybook. It was desperate. It was the collision of two people who had spent days running for their lives. Kaylin's arms wrapped around her, pulling her crushed against his chest, lifting her slightly off the floor as if he were afraid the gravity generator would fail and she would float away. Ilara's fingers tangled in his short, dark hair, gripping tight. She opened to him, tasting the desperation, the salt, the undeniable life of him. The kiss deepened, crossing boundaries that had stood for centuries between their species, between their stations. It was a rejection of the protocol. It was a rejection of the contract. For a long minute, there was no war. There was no conspiracy. There was only the friction of silk against canvas, the mingling of breath, and the fierce, terrifying realization that they belonged to each other. From the shadows of the ventilation alcove, gold eyes watched. Valera stood perfectly still, her form blending into the darkness. She had come to find them, to ask about the perimeter sensors, but she had stopped at the door. She watched the way the human soldier held the royal female. She watched the way their bodies pressed together, not in combat, not in dominance, but in a mutual, frantic need for closeness. She felt a strange, twisting sensation in her gut. It was not disgust. It was a complicated knot of jealousy and longing. She looked at her own hands, ending in black talons. She touched her own chest, where her heart beat a slow, powerful rhythm. She had been bred in a tube. She had been designed to be alone, to be a weapon that functioned without attachment. But seeing them, she felt the hollowness of her own design. She understood the biology of mating. The manuals were clear on reproductive cycles. But this was not biology. This was something else. This was the choice Kaylin had spoken of. They were choosing to be vulnerable. They were choosing to lower their shields. A dark thought whispered in her mind. You are the third wheel. You are the mission. They have each other. You have nothing. Valera felt a spike of protectiveness. She wanted to stand between them and the door, to guard this fragile thing they had made, but also a deep, aching loneliness. She was an outsider, a monster in a room with two lovers, quietly, with the stealth of a predator. She backed away. She retreated down the corridor, finding a dark corner in the cargo bay where she could curl up, wrap her wings around herself, and wrestle with the new, confusing pain of being a person who wanted things she couldn't name. An hour later, the three of them gathered in the monastery's central archive. The monks had brought food, simple bowls of protein broth, and set up a tactical display on the main table. The mood was shifted. The air between Kaylin and Ilara was charged, electric. But they sat on opposite sides of the table, trying to maintain a professional distance. Valera sat at the end of the table. She did not eat. She watched them. So, Valera said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The dynamic has changed. Kaylin looked up, clearing his throat. Valera, we are just reviewing the intel. I have eyes. Kaylin, Valera said flatly. I saw you in the medical bay. I saw the bonding. Ilara flushed a deep violet, burying her face in her hands. Oh, stars. Valera looked between them. Her face was unreadable, her golden eyes cold. Does this mean I am discarded? She asked. The question hit the room with the force of a physical blow. What? Kaylin asked, frowning. If you are. Mates, Valera said, struggling with the words. If you are a unit now. Does that mean the mission is over? Am I to be left here? Am I the baggage you drop so you can run faster? No, Ilara cried, jumping up. Valera, no! Ilara rushed around the table, stopping a few feet from the dragon woman. She looked horrified. We would never leave you. You are part of this, part of us, part of what? Valera challenged. I am not a pet. I am not a guard dog. If I am not the mission, what am I? Ilara opened her mouth, then floundered. She waved her hands helplessly. You are like a sister? No, that is weird. We are different species. You are like a comrade, a cousin? She looked at Kaelin for help. Help me. Vance, I am terrible at this. Kaelin stood up. He walked over to Valera. He didn't loom over her. He leaned against the table, meeting her eye level. Valera, he said, you are thinking in old terms. In the lab, everything had a label, subject, asset, control group. If you weren't useful, you were terminated. Valera nodded slowly. Yes, that is the law of the cage. We are not in a cage, Kaelin said. We are outside. And outside, relationships are not defined by utility. They are defined by choice. He gestured between himself, Ilara, and Valera. We don't own you. We don't need you to be useful to keep you around. We choose you. Because you stood with us, because you fought for us, because you are Valera. Valera tilted her head, her slit pupils widening as she processed this. I can choose, she asked. Yes, Kaelin said. You can choose to leave. You can choose to stay. You can choose to be a friend. You can choose to be family. Found family, Ilara interjected, smiling tentatively. It is a literary trope, but a very good one. It means people who are stuck together and decide they like it. Valera looked at Ilara, then at Kaelin. She sensed the truth in them. They were not trying to manage her. They were offering her a seat at the table. Family. Valera tested the word. It implies shared nest, shared defense? Basically. Kaelin grinned and shared protein broth. Valera looked at the bowl of broth. She picked it up and downed it in one gulp. Acceptable, she stated. I will stay. But if you start mating in the cockpit again, I will fly outside the ship. Kaelin choked on his own spit. Ilara turned the color of a supernova. We were not, Ilara squeaked. Valera smirked, a terrifying, toothy expression that was her first attempt at a smile. Humor, Valera rasped. I am attempting humor. Was it successful? Kaelin wiped his mouth, laughing. Very successful. Torch. Very successful. The levity did not last long. The High Archivist entered the room, its multiple limbs clicking on the floor plates. You must see this, the Archivist said, activating the main holoscreen. The image flared to life. It was a montage of news feeds from across the sector. The file Ilara had uploaded, the Chimera data, had gone viral. Human news networks were screaming about war crimes redux. Orithian independent channels were showing the footage of Valera fighting the drones, debating whether she was a monster or a victim. But the Empire was spinning it. A sleek Orithian spokesman appeared on the screen. Regrettable terrorist attack on the Iron Saint Monastery. The renegade mercenary Kaelin Vance has brainwashed the Princess Ilara using illegal neural tech. The creature seen in the footage is a rogue biological weapon stolen from a secure facility. Citizens are urged to report any sightings. They are controlling the narrative, Kaelin muttered. They are making us out to be monsters and victims. They are ignoring the funding trails. The leak wounded them, Ilara observed, her eyes narrowing. But it didn't kill them. They are too big, too entrenched. People want to believe the lie because the truth is uncomfortable. So what do we do? Valera asked. We cannot fight the whole fleet. No, Kalen agreed. But we can fight the lie. He pointed to a scrolling headline at the bottom of the feed. Galactic Peace Summit to convene in Orithian capital in 3 days. All sector leaders attending. There, Kalen said. The summit, Ilara gasped. Kalen, that is in the Imperial Palace, in the Grand Audience Hall. Exactly, Kalen said. Every camera in the galaxy will be there, every ambassador, every high-born noble. If we walk in there, Valera said, her wings twitching, we die. If we sneak in, Kalen corrected, and if we broadcast the full unredacted archive from the central podium. They cannot spin that. Not when the princess is standing there, unbrainwashed, telling the truth to her father's face. It is suicidal, Ilara whispered. Yes, Kalen admitted. It is. Ilara looked at the screen. She looked at the faces of the citizens, her people, who were being lied to. She looked at Valera, who was a living testament to the lie. She thought about the pet she had wanted, the safety. Then she thought about the woman she wanted to be. We do it, Ilara said. We go home, and we burn it down. Preparation for the run was frantic. The monks provided supplies, old charts of the capital's sewer systems, and a few prayers. In the final hour before departure, the tension between Kalen and Ilara boiled over. They stood in the hangar bay, by the Wraith's ramp. I am not letting you walk into the audience hall without armor, Kalen argued, holding up a heavy tactical vest. It is a diplomatic summit, Kalen, Ilara argued back, pushing the vest away. I cannot wear body armor over a ceremonial gown. I need to look like a scion, not a soldier. If I look afraid, they win. If you look dead, they also win, Kalen snapped. He threw the vest onto a crate. He paced away, running a hand through his hair. I hate this plan. Ilara, I hate it. I am supposed to keep you safe, bringing you there. It is serving you up on a platter. I am not yours to keep safe, Ilara shouted. She grabbed his arm, spinning him around. I am not a package, Kalen. I am not an assignment. I am your partner. Partner? Kalen laughed bitterly. Look at us, Ilara. Look at where we are going. If we survive this, what then? You are the Empress. I am... What? The human consort? The pet soldier standing behind the throne? Is that what you think? Ilara asked, hurt flashing in her eyes. It is the reality, Kalen yelled. I am a grunt. You are royalty. We had a moment in the dark, but in the light of the capital. I will just be the liability you keep around. You are a coward, Ilara whispered. You are brave enough to fight an army, but you are too scared to fight for a life with me. I am trying to save your life. You are trying to control it. Enough! The roar came from the top of the ramp. Valera stood there, looking down at them like a disappointed parent. She walked down the ramp, her heavy footsteps echoing. She stopped between them. You are both idiots, she declared. Valera? Kalen started. Silence, soldier, Valera hissed. She pointed a claw at Kalen. You are afraid she will die, so you try to put her in a box of armor. She pointed at Ilara. You are afraid he will leave, so you try to force him into a role he does not fit. She looked at both of them. You are both afraid of losing control, she said. Control is a cage, Valera said softly. I know cages, I lived in one. It feels safe because nothing changes, but nothing grows there either. She stepped closer to Kalen, poking him in the chest with a talon. Love is a risk, Kalen. It is the ultimate lack of control. You give someone the power to hurt you. You give them the power to die and leave you broken. That is the deal. You cannot armor plate it. She turned to Alara. And you. You cannot command him to be what you want. You have to let him be what he is. Even if it is messy. Even if it doesn't fit the protocol. The dragon woman, the creature bred for war, looked at them with ancient, sorrowful eyes. If you want to survive the capital, you must stop fighting each other and start trusting. Vulnerability is not a weakness. It is the only way you fit together without breaking. Kalen looked at Alara. The anger drained out of him, leaving only the ache. She is right, he murmured. Alara nodded, wiping her eyes. She is very annoying, but she is right. Kalen reached out and took Alara's hand. He didn't try to pull her or shield her, he just held it. No more mandates, Kalen said. No more trying to fix the outcome. We go in. We do the job. And whatever happens, we face it. Together. Together. Alara agreed. And no more calling me a grunt, Kalen added with a small smile. I prefer tactical specialist. Alara laughed, noted. They turned to Valera. Alara held out her other hand. Valera looked at it. Then she reached out, her black scaled hand engulfing Alara's pale one. Kalen placed his hand over theirs. 3 hands, scales, skin, and scars. A pact, Kalen said solemnly. No pets, no owners, no chains. Only choice, Valera said. Only choice, Alara echoed. They broke the circle. The energy in the hangar shifted. It was no longer the frantic energy of fugitives. It was the solid, dangerous resolve of a team. Let us go, Kalen said, turning toward the ship. We have a summit to crash. Valera walked up the ramp, her wings held high. Alara followed, her head held high. And Kalen Vance, the human veteran who had sworn off war, checked his pistol one last time and followed them into the fire. The capital city of Oris was a lie built of glass and light. From the viewport of the descending shuttle, utilizing a forged diplomatic transponder code that identified them as a grain transport from the outer agrospheres. The city looked like a jewel. Spires of spun diamond pierced the violet clouds, connected by ribbons of anti-gravity trains that shimmered like gold thread. Floating gardens drifted lazily in the upper atmosphere, dripping with bioluminescent vines. It was a paradise, a testament to the order and prosperity of the Orithian Empire. Kalen Vance gripped the yoke of the Wraith, his knuckles white. He knew what lay beneath the glitter. He knew the foundations of those spires were anchored in the bones of conquered worlds and the silence of erased histories. We are in the net, Kalen said, his voice tight. Local air traffic control has accepted the spoof. We have a 15-minute window before the handshake code refreshes and they realize we are not carrying grain. Alara sat in the co-pilot seat, her hands flying across a holographic keyboard. She was no longer the terrified girl in the silk dress. She wore a stolen mechanic's jumpsuit, her silver hair pulled back in a severe knot, her eyes narrowed in concentration. I am into the palace substructure, she reported. The security grid is heavy today. The Peace Summit has every sensor running hot. But there is a blind spot in the waste reclamation tunnels. Sewers again. Valera rumbled from the back. She was unrecognizable. They had bound her wings tight to her body with compression bandages, hiding the majestic span beneath a heavy, hooded cloak. She wore a decorative mask of beaten bronze, a common affectation for bodyguards of the outer rim nobility. It hid her snout and horns, but it could not hide the golden fire in her eyes. It is not a sewer, Alara corrected, though a faint smile touched her lips. It is a hydrological recycling conduit. It smells the same, Valera noted. Kalen brought the ship down hard in a narrow canyon of industrial venting stacks on the city's perimeter. This was the smuggler's run, a route he had flown a lifetime ago when delivering illicit medical supplies to war refugees. "We walk from here," Kalen said, powering down the engines. They moved through the undercity, a labyrinth of steam and shadows that existed beneath the pristine streets. Kalen led them with the instinct of a wolf navigating its own territory. He knew which pressure plates were alarmed and which guards could be bribed with a bottle of synthetic whiskey. As they ascended a service lift toward the palace levels, the air changed. The smell of ozone and rot faded, replaced by the scent of crushed petals and expensive perfume. Ilara paused to adjust her disguise. Over her jumpsuit, she donned a heavy ceremonial robe they had fabricated on the ship, deep indigo, embroidered with silver thread. It was the garb of a minor cleric, high enough to walk the halls, low enough to be ignored. "Ready?" Kalen asked. He had swapped his flight suit for the stiff, high-collared uniform of a palace guard, stolen from a drunken conscript in the lower city. Ilara took a breath. Her hand trembled, but she steadied it. "Ready?" she said. They emerged into the Hall of Ancestors. It was a cavernous corridor of white marble, lined with statues of Orithian heroes. Each figure was 10 feet tall, carved from weeping stone, depicted in poses of noble sacrifice. Kalen stopped in front of one statue. It depicted a general holding a broken flag, his face a mask of sorrowful duty. The plaque read, "General Thrax, the shield of the Reach, who brought peace to the Xylos sector." Kalen felt a surge of bile in his throat. He remembered Thrax. He remembered the general ordering orbital bombardment on civilian settlements to flush out resistance fighters. He remembered the smell of burning flesh on the wind. "It is a lie," Kalen whispered. Valera stepped up beside him, her masked face tilting toward the stone hero. "Stone does not remember," she rasped. "Stone only says what the carver tells it to say." Kalen looked at the statue, then at Ilara. "This is how they win," Kalen said, his voice hard. "Not with guns, with stories. They take the blood and the horror and they carve it into something beautiful, and they put it in a hallway where the light is perfect. And after 100 years, the truth is just a rumor, and the statue is history." "Who gets to define the truth?" Ilara asked softly. "The one who is loud enough to interrupt the silence." Kalen replied. He turned away from the statue. "Let us go make some noise." They reached the data hub, a secure server room located directly beneath the grand audience hall. The hum of the summit vibrated through the ceiling, the applause of thousands of nobles, the drone of speeches celebrating unity and progress. Ilara moved to the main terminal. She plugged in the data spike containing the files from the monastery. The videos of the cages, the funding records, the battle footage, the list of names. "I am bypassing the broadcast delay," Ilara said, her fingers dancing. "When I trigger this, it will override every hollow screen in the palace, every news feed in the capital, every relay buoy in the sector." "Do it," Kalen said. "I need 5 minutes to splice the feed," Ilara said. The door to the corridor hissed. Red warning lights spun on the wall. A security team had clocked their unauthorized entry. "They are coming," Valera said. She stepped into the doorway, her bronze mask gleaming in the emergency light. Kalen raised his stolen pulse rifle. "We hold the room." "No," Valera said. She turned to face them. "You go to the hall," she commanded. "The princess must be seen. The truth needs a face. If you stay here fighting guards in a basement, the broadcast is just noise. They will cut the feed and say it is a glitch. But if she is standing on the podium, they cannot look away." Kalen hesitated. His instinct was to form a perimeter, to protect the asset. "I cannot leave you here alone," Kalen said. "They will send the containment units." "I know," Valera said. She reached up and unclasped the bronze mask, letting it clang to the floor. She revealed her face, the scales, the horns, the fierce, terrifying beauty of her hybrid nature. "Go," she said. "You promised to choose, Kalen. You promised not to chain. Do not chain me with your protection. Let me buy you time." Kalen looked at her. He saw the warrior. He saw the friend. "Give them hell." "Torch," he said softly. Valera grinned, a flash of white teeth. "I intend to." She shoved them toward the service lift that led to the stage wings. Then she turned back to the corridor, cracked her knuckles, and waited for the door to breach. The grand audience hall was a sea of velvet and jewels. 10,000 nobles sat in tiered rows, watching the center stage where the emperor, Ilara's father, stood at a podium of crystal. He looked weary but majestic, his voice amplified to a godlike resonance. "We have weathered the storms of war," the emperor intoned. "We have forged a galaxy where order reigns, where the sanctity of life is cherished above all." Ilara stepped out from the shadows of the heavy velvet curtains. She had shed the cleric's robe. She stood in her torn, stained silk dress, the bandage on her ribs visible through the rip. Her hair was wild. She looked like a survivor of a shipwreck walking into a ballroom. Kalen walked beside her, his hand resting openly on the grip of his pistol. He did not salute. He did not bow. He scanned the crowd with the cold, professional gaze of a predator. "Lies." Ilara's voice rang out, not amplified, but sharp enough to cut through the emperor's drone. The hall went silent. 10,000 heads turned. The emperor froze. He looked at the girl in the ruined dress. "Ilara," he whispered, the microphone catching his shock. "My child, you are safe. The kidnappers released you." "I was not kidnapped, Father," Ilara said, walking steadily toward the podium. Guards started to move, their armor clanking. Kalen stepped forward, placing his body between them and the princess. He didn't raise his weapon, but his stance made it clear that anyone who touched her would pay a high price. "Stand down!" the emperor commanded the guards, his eyes fixed on his daughter. Ilara reached the base of the podium. She looked up at the man who had raised her, the man who had bought her ponies and taught her history. "I was not kidnapped," she repeated, her voice gaining strength, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "I ran away. I ran away to find the thing you promised me. I wanted a pet, remember?" The emperor's face paled. "Ilara, this is not the place. You are unwell. The trauma." "I found my pet," Ilara continued, her voice trembling with rage. "I found her in a cage beneath the station. I found her wearing a collar with your name on the receipt." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Collar, receipt. I saw what you paid for," Ilara said. "I saw the labs. I saw the torture. I saw the creatures you bred to die for your comfort. Enough." High Counselor Vorian stood up from the front row, his face twisted in fury. "Seize her! She is delusional. The human has broken her mind." Ilara looked at Kalen. "Now!" Kalen tapped the remote trigger in his hand. The crystal dome of the hall darkened. The massive holographic banners that displayed the imperial crest flickered and died. Then, they flared back to life. But they did not show the crest. They showed a cage. They showed Valera, chained and bleeding. They showed the shock collar sparking. They showed the list of funding approvals, scrolling in high definition, with the Emperor's signature highlighted in red. They showed the bodies of failed experiments piled in a ditch on Orav Prime. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated horror. Across the empire, the same images hijacked every screen. In the noble houses of the Outer Rim, wealthy matriarchs looked up from their tea to see the monsters they funded. In the barracks of the military, soldiers saw the creatures they had fought alongside, realizing they were not droids, but slaves. In the hallway beneath the stage, Valera fought. A squad of elite Praetorians had breached the door. They wore heavy armor and carried shock staves designed to incapacitate large beasts. Valera moved like smoke and fire. She ducked under a swinging staff, grabbing the guard by the breastplate and hurling him into the wall. She didn't use her claws to rip. She used her strength to disarm. Another guard lunged. Valera caught the staff, ignoring the electricity that crackled up her arm. She snapped the weapon in half and swept the guard's legs out from under him. "Monster!" the guard screamed, scrabbling back. Valera paused. She stood over him, her chest heaving, smoke curling from her nostrils. The old rage was there, the red haze that wanted to burn, to tear, to kill. It would be so easy. It would be justice. But she heard Kalen's voice in her memory. "Scars mean you healed." She looked at the terrified guard. "No," Valera said, her voice deep and resonant. "Not a monster, a choice." She reached down, ripped the power pack from his armor, leaving him immobile but alive. "I choose not to be what you made me," she growled. She turned and blasted the locking mechanism of the service lift with a controlled burst of plasma, sealing off the reinforcements. Then she turned toward the stairs that led up to the stage. Back in the Great Hall, the silence had broken into chaos. Vorian was shouting orders. Guards were confused, looking between their commanders and the damning images on the screens. The Emperor stood slumped at the podium, staring at the holographic proof of his own sins. He looked old, defeated. "Treason," Vorian screamed. He pulled a disruptor pistol from his robes. He wasn't aiming at Alara. He was aiming at the Emperor. If the Emperor fell, Vorian could claim the humans assassinated him. He could seize control. He could bury the truth in a new war. Kalen saw the shift. He saw the glint of metal. "Down!" Kalen roared. He didn't dive for cover. He dove forward. He tackled the Emperor, throwing the old man to the ground just as a violet beam of energy scorched the air where the monarch's heart had been. Kalen rolled, shielding the Emperor with his own body. Raising his pulse rifle, he fired 3 shots. Vorian's pistol clattered to the floor as the High Counselor fell, clutching his shoulder. The hall froze again. The human mercenary, the monster, was covering the Emperor. He wasn't killing the tyrant. He was saving the father. "Why?" The Emperor wheezed, looking up at Kalen's scarred face. "Because I am done with killing," Kalen grunted, keeping his aim trained on the remaining conspirators. "And because she loves you, though I have no idea why." The heavy double doors at the back of the stage exploded inward. Splinters of wood and twisted metal rained down. Valera stepped through the ruin. She was bleeding from a dozen small wounds. Her cloak was gone. Her wings were spread to their full, terrifying span, blocking out the stage lights. She looked like a demon from the old myths, but she did not attack. She walked to Ilara's side and stood there. Ilara, the princess, Kalen, the soldier, Valera, the dragon. They stood together, a triad of defiance against the backdrop of the burning truth. The guards lowered their weapons. No one wanted to be the first to fire at that image. The Emperor slowly stood up, helped by Kalen. He looked at his daughter. He looked at the dragon woman. He looked at the holograms of the cages. He looked out at the sea of faces, his subjects, who were watching him with judgment rather than adoration. "It is true," the Emperor whispered, his voice amplified by the microphone that had fallen to the floor. "All of it. He took the crown from his head, a circle of woven gold and light, and placed it on the podium. I order an immediate cessation of Project Chimera, he announced, his voice shaking. I order the release of all assets. I order an investigation into myself. He slumped, covering his face with his hands. Ilara stepped forward. She didn't touch the crown. She looked at the crowd. It is not enough to stop, she cried out. We do not just want the cages open. We want rights. We want recognition. They are not assets. They are citizens, the crowd murmured. It was a radical thought, but looking at Valera, standing tall and proud, it was a thought that could no longer be dismissed. In the weeks that followed, the capital was a storm of hearings, tribunals, and riots. The government dissolved and reformed. The half-measure of the emperor became a tidal wave of reform as the public, horrified by the reality of their pets, demanded change. A delegation from the new provisional council came to the safe house where the trio was staying. They offered titles. They offered Kalen a generalship. They offered Valera a seat on the reparations commission. We are not bureaucrats, Kalen told them, leaning against the doorframe, his bags already packed. We are just people, Ilara added, holding Valera's hand. And we are very tired of noise. They left the capital quietly, while the statues were still being pulled down. Epilogue. The moon of Orus IV was a quiet place. It was a frontier world of red cliffs, thermal springs, and endless fields of violet grass that hummed in the wind. The house was built into the cliffside, a structure of wood and stone that looked like it had grown there. In the courtyard, Kalen Vance moved through the forms of a defensive kata. He was not alone. A dozen children, some human, some Orithian, some hybrid kids with scales and fur mimicked his movements. They were orphans of the transition, the unwanted byproducts of the labs and the war. Keep your guard up, Kalen instructed gently, correcting a young girl's stance. You do not fight to hurt. You fight to create space, space to choose. Above them, a shadow swept over the sun. Valera dove from the clouds. She didn't land. She stalled in the air, her wings catching the updraft, laughing as she did a barrel roll that delighted the children. She was strong now, her scales lustrous and golden, her eyes bright with the joy of uninhibited flight. She landed on the cliff edge, folding her wings with a heavy thud snap. Show off, Kalen called out, smiling. Jealous because you have no lift, Valera teased, hopping down to the courtyard, inside the house. Ilara sat at a terminal. She was arguing with a magistrate 3 systems away via hologram. I do not care about the zoning laws, Ilara said, her voice firm but calm. The refugees need water filters. Send them, or I will come there and explain the logistics to you personally. And bring the dragon. The magistrate paled and agreed instantly. Ilara closed the channel and sighed, rubbing her temples. She walked out to the balcony that overlooked the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of orange and purple. Fireflies, native to the moon, began to drift up from the grass, glowing with soft blue light. Kalen and Valera joined her. They sat on the wide wooden bench, the 3 of them pressed together against the chill of the evening. Ilara rested her head on Kalen's shoulder. Kalen's arm went around her waist, easy and familiar. Valera sat on Ilara's other side. She didn't pull away. She leaned in, her warmth radiating like a furnace, slowly, casually. She curled her long, scaled tail around both of their ankles, binding them together. It is quiet tonight, Valera noted. It is. Kalen agreed. No speeches, no explosions, just life. Ilara looked at the fireflies. She traced the scar on Kaylin's hand with her finger. "You know," she murmured, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "I did get what I wanted." Kaylin raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "I asked for a pet," she said. Valera growled low in her throat, a warning rumble. Ilara laughed, squeezing Valera's hand. "I was wrong," Ilara corrected herself softly. "I didn't want a pet. A pet is easy. A pet obeys. I wanted this. Partners," Valera said firmly. "Partners." Kaylin agreed. Ilara smiled, closing her eyes as she leaned deeper into the warmth of her strange, broken, beautiful family. "Not a pet," she whispered into the twilight. "A promise." Valera tugged gently on a lock of Ilara's silver hair. "Careful with the words." "Princess," the dragon woman warned affectionately. "Or I will burn your shoes." Kaylin laughed, a sound that echoed off the cliffs and drifted up to the stars. The galaxy was still messy. The laws were still being written. The scars were still healing. But as the three of them sat there, choosing to stay, choosing to hold on, they proved the one truth that the statues and the history books could never capture. Promises based on chains rust and break, but promises based on freedom? Those were the only things strong enough to hold the world together.